All right, welcome everyone to the April 2025 FMDiSC meeting. We were just discussing that FMDiSC doesn't really stand for anything anymore because we're no longer in Southern California. We're in the ether, but it's good to see a lot of faces from all over the country, all over the world. And speaking of all over the world, our first presenter is Gabriel Woodger, coming here to us from the UK. First met Gabriel just in one of these meetings, just during the chat session before the meeting started, and he mentioned the system he works on. So I thought it sounded interesting and thought it would be good for the group to see it. So Gabriel, I'll hand the mic over to you. Take it away.
That's great. Thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, so
Yes.
very honoured to be part of this today. I'm just going to quickly share my screen. I've got a really short presentation, and then we'll do a bit of a demo. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Gabriel. I have a business here in the UK. We have a vertical market solution, and we sort of do some kind of stuff that I think is quite cool in there. So I'm just going to sort of do a little demo of some of the stuff. So feel free to I'll probably demo some bits. Feel free to ask. I'm happy to show anything about how stuff is done and talk about some of the techniques and other kind of bits and pieces. It's obviously, I don't want to just be a bit salesy and say, isn't my software amazing? I just have kind of some kind of cool stuff that I've kind of come across and kind of developed. So who am I? So co-founder of a business called Woodge Software. So we're a SPA and we make a software solution for kitchen manufacturers. So here in the UK, we kind of quite a niche industry. We sort of found a market that has a need for custom software where the existing stuff doesn't necessarily off the shelf, doesn't fit people's needs, but there's enough need and enough crossover between different customers that the need for something like a vertical market solution exists. So prior to doing FileMaker stuff, I was head of creative services for a large kind of automotive services company called Cox, big sort of global company, which I did, in charge of a big team of graphic designers and product design and other bits and pieces like that. I spent a number of years as a university lecturer, and I've been a FileMaker developer for sort of 15 years. So I think, like lots of other people, I had a job and I had something to do and I had a problem to solve. And about 15 years ago, I needed to track time for the designers in the department. So I couldn't quite find anything that I needed off the shelf. That didn't quite need to do what we needed to do, some custom stuff in terms of hours and billings and stuff. So I came across FileMaker and started building something in FileMaker. And then as I stayed at that company, the system grew and grew and grew, and we added bits and pieces to it. And we sort of kind of enjoyed that side of it. And then following that, kind of the opportunity came up to sort of start a software business doing that. So yeah, I think a story that some other people may have had similar origin stories as to how they kind of came across FileMaker. So I'm just going to play a real short, tiny little video that just sort of is a real brief overview of what our software does, and then I'll jump into a bit of a demo. So our software platform basically is a kind of entire business process management for a I'm going to turn that down a bit, it's a bit loud. A kind of a kitchen manufacturer. So everything from quoting and CRM through to a product catalog, task management, the managing of workflow through a workshop, the exporting to kind of data to CNC machines and other bits and pieces like that, as well as more recently a kind of a 3D visualization package. So being able to actually use FileMaker as a kind of a piece of CAD software to 3D visualize what these cabinets are going to look like and be able to make parametric changes and other bits and pieces like that to products and be able to see those kind of in real time. So yeah, this is our software. So we've had it kind of in market now probably for about maybe 6 years, something like that. So it sort of started, we worked with one customer initially, who kind of needed a piece of software, and we built it, developed it from there. And obviously working on a single piece of software over that amount of time, we're a relatively small company, but it allows you to kind of add quite a bit of refinement to that software, whereas it's not often you necessarily are able to spend all of your time slowly refining a single piece of software. Often if you're a consultant, you might come in and build something, or if you're selling a product, you might build it, sell it, and then you're kind of off sort of from there. So one of the big things we have with, and I think it's probably the same with any vertical market piece of software, is the balance between having it configured to that customer's business logic, but in a way that means you're not coding customer specific information into the system. So there's always a balance there between trying to make it flexible to cover different businesses work in different ways, but in a way that is manageable as a piece of software grows. If you kind of single use things lots and lots of times, then you end up with a real kind of spaghetti heap of things, which then as you try to add new features and kind of stuff later, can then become quite difficult to keep track of all of those changes. So what we've done quite heavily is used kind of web viewers within FileMaker. So what you'll see in here is a list of orders, something a fairly simple list view, but people want to be able to have different statuses and different orders, and actually they might want to include different pieces of information kind of about that. So we use basically in lots of places in the system a combination of FileMaker layout objects and the web viewer elements, and we try to do it in a way where these things match together so that the user doesn't necessarily know which buttons come from FileMaker and which buttons come from the kind of web viewer. So in here, let's jump quickly into layout mode. We'll see in here we've got some global repeating fields for navigation at the top, and we've got some buttons in here to make new orders and to toggle between a couple of different modes, and the rest of this is a web viewer inside of here. So effectively what we're doing here is, if I bring up the script debugger when this loads, we identify based on which layout we've come from. We then load a particular set of configuration in here. So what we're doing in here is building basically the JavaScript that's required dynamically with the configuration. So this will tell the web viewer what columns, using this data tables library, what columns we have and how these need to be displayed, how these things need to be sorted by, what the formatting of these things are, is it day, month, day, year, etc. Like that, to be able to actually build the layout for the web viewer. That gets rendered, gets basically a global variable with the kind of HTML that's required, and that will then basically load an empty table. So we've configured it, we've told it how we want these columns to appear, what their names, what their orders are, and then from here what will happen then is the web viewer itself will self-kick. So we're in a kind of a loading state in here. We've got a kind of nice little animation inside of here to say these orders are loading. It's a big system with tens or hundreds of thousands of orders. You might want to it might take a couple of seconds to load, and then in here I'll use execute SQL to basically do a very high performance search against the database to load all of the records that we want to see. So we'll see in here I'm loading a variable full of data in here, and this is just a two-dimensional array, so an array of arrays. If I wrap a format on that, we'll see kind of what's happening. So this is just grabbing for every single order in the table, grabbing some information, the primary key, the order, basically each of the columns of pieces of information in here. So doing this by using an execute SQL is significantly faster than doing it via the data API. If we were trying to grab those information, we'd have to have those particular fields on a layout, and based on client configuration, they may want different fields in there, whereas we can calculate and generate an SQL statement based on configuration data. So it's not hard coded into the script. We're saying load these particular fields. So if a customer wants to see an order, a count of things or something like that, we don't have to include that in every single query, and we don't have to pay the additional overhead that an execute data API call kind of has. So then obviously this data comes in, gets loaded in the web viewer, and then this is loaded inside of it. So obviously being able to have something like a data tables layout allows us to do some kind of stuff that would be lovely to be able to do in FileMaker, such as variable width items and other elements like that. Allows us to kind of quickly, filter as you type, things like that. Be able to do quick kind of tagging of kind of categories. And also it comes with things like you can have an advanced search builder. So I might want to say, show me all of the orders where the net value is greater than £2,000. So I'm able to create a custom kind of search on the fly to be able to find this. And actually I can save this particular search in here, and then be able to at a later date recall a saved search that I previously used. So all of the orders that contain the word test or something like that. So a lot of this functionality is built directly into the data tables library, which I'm sure some of you will have kind of come across before, but we've used it quite extensively because it allows us to match these list views to our standard kind of FileMaker list views. So some places in the system, a list of products in here, we've just got, it's a standard FileMaker list view. So, behaves as expected. Couple of thousand records, gets a little bit slow as you scroll down to the bottom as those records are loaded in. But as this is just a standard, standard FileMaker list view with a sub summary for when it's the grouped by type in here. From a user's perspective, they don't necessarily know in here if they're searching for a product in here. We're doing a type as you search in here, that some elements of the system are built in a web viewer and some of them are built in FileMaker. Because if I was to do everything in a web viewer, it's a lot more work. It's much quicker and easier just to drop a field on, change some options in here and be able to do that. So rather than going whole hog and replacing every single list view in my system with a web view, I tend to do it only where there's a requirement for that. So if the user needs different information, so for instance, some customers might say they want height, width, depth in different orders, we'd have to have show hide conditions and preferences and other bits and pieces like that. Whereas if this is a list of a CRM and a client says, actually, rather than having the postcode in here or the number of quotes inside of there, this can be configured per customer. So we're not having to keep and maintain a load of different kind of layouts inside of there. So that allows us basically in data to be able to store with that particular client's installation of it, that customization, what information they want kind of from there. And that works great in certain places. You can do that fast typing and searching.
Good question, Gabriel.
Yes.
So you say you use web viewers kind of where you're going to get the payoff because it's more effort. If you waved magic wand and it was the same effort to do it in FileMaker versus web viewer, would you do everything in web viewers, or are there places where a FileMaker feature is advantageous over a web viewer?
There are some downsides of using a web viewer. In the way that you don't get the kind of automatic data federation and updates that you would get in a FileMaker list view. If I go into the CRM and change someone else's, change this client's name, right, in a web viewer, I'm not going to get that until I refresh. Do that. If in FileMaker, you're going to get that. It's going to update automatically as it appears there. It also becomes it is more time and maybe if it was as quick, then it would do, but there's something very satisfying about being able to go into edit layout mode, change something and put something in there. Whereas when this is all running in code,
right,
the code lives in a different place, so that when I load this view in here, I've got a script that runs, and then depending on which layout ID it calls, it gets called in here. But if I want to go in here and change something in here, I mean, I have to know how to write JavaScript, and I've got, other bits and pieces like here.
Right.
This is, if I want to set the sort order in here, I have to know this is the first element in the array is ascending and the second element is ascending. So we're doing it by whatever the first column is, by the first letter of the name, and then by the name in here. Whereas in FileMaker, great. I can just go change the sort order, easy peasy. I'm away like that if I want to add another sub summary or something like that. So I think it's still a balance between which of those is right. I think there's a lot of talk at the moment about people saying, why don't you just replace the entire user interface of FileMaker with a web viewer? And I think while it's attractive in some ways, there's a lot of downside. There's a lot of stuff that you get from a FileMaker app that you don't have to necessarily think about.
I had a FedEx driver come here one day. It just rained, like literally just rained. And he pulled around the corner.
I think Mark's talking in the background
there.
Yeah, I'm going to mute
him.
Okay, so thank you for that.
So also the other way we can do that is it doesn't have to necessarily be a table view. So this is again using the same data tables library, but in here, rather than having like a table mode with with a list of cells in here, this is customer specific information we want to capture against the client. So when there's a visit that happens, you can ask them how did they hear about it. You can do a multi-checkbox in here. So in here, this is all done in the web viewer, and when you make a change in here, you have to then pass the field that you're modifying, the ID of the thing you're doing into there, and have a script update that. So you have to do that. You have to kind of write that and say, right, when the data is updated from here, you have to have a FileMaker script. You don't have to, but in this way, you have a FileMaker script to go off and kind of update that. But this then allows what these types of information are to be much more customizable, and you get a nice layout in here where you can flick between, okay, we'll answer the general questions in here, this is a drop down, this is something else like that. So this is all just using, under the hood, it's actually a table. So this is a table with rows and cells in here, using the data tables library. But in here, I'm just using CSS to change this from being styled as a card view to being styled as a table view from here. So by just changing the CSS, we're able to kind of make changes in there. So this is useful where you want to do like grids of documents or something like that, to say, right, here's all the quotes and bits and pieces that are attached to here. So this is one of those opportunities that's great for a web viewer, because you can have a nice little card view, and these, depending on the screen size, these you can have as many or as few of these as you want to. But then if I want to go into a quote and view a file, then I've got a standard FileMaker card window in here, and I can, next and previous through the billing documents that kind of relate to that order. So we tend to do a combination of different bits and pieces like that is specific to that use case. It does kind of allow you to kind of come with a nice kind of polished user interface that looks kind of nice and kind of modern, in a way that people don't necessarily realize it's a series of records, a list, master detail, list view kind of from it. So we use data tables as a library quite heavily for that. So for instance, like a user's dashboard, they've got tasks which are assigned to them, filtered by all sorts of different bits and pieces. One of our customers had mentioned how they really like Monday.com. They were using it as a task management software, and they really liked you could just start typing someone's name and mention them in a comment, and the person gets pinged with an email just to say, oh, what's going on with this project from there. And they sort of said, oh, well, can your system do that? And I was like, well, I don't think so. And I had a thought about it, and I sort of thought, well, I'm sure there is a way to do that there's a JavaScript library called Tribute, I think it's called, in here, and you can just type an @ symbol in here, and you can just then start typing someone's name in here, pick it from here and say, what's happening with this? And then as soon as I click out of here, it's going to, if I turn the script to debugger on, it's going to fire a script, which is going to then modify that field. It's going to go off and write that into the database somewhere. And then it's going to then send an email. So if I step through, you'll see it in here. So it's going to then go off and send an email to that person inside of there. So whether that's done from a table in here or like a card detail view in here, you can then do that in here. So this is a really nice kind of user interface kind of thing which we've stolen from another product. A customer said, we have Monday.com, we use it, and we had tasks in the system before, but it's those tiny little user interface niceties that is the difference between someone clicking a button that says new task, pick a person from a drop down list, it's so and so, send them a question, what's going on with this project, send email, being able to change that to simply then be able to, quickly type something in there. People are very used to social media, just typing a hash or an at kind of character to kind of reference people's names. So we found little bits and pieces like that really make the difference from a user's a perspective as to how that becomes nicer. So yeah, let's have a quick jump through. Let's look at some audits. The other thing that's quite nice with these as well is the state of each of these. If I do a search in here and do test, this web viewer in here has its own storage in this layout. In this web viewer, we can see in here we've got some information in here as to what configuration this is in. So I've typed a view in here. So if I go back to the home page and go back to that layout, then this gets restored automatically. I don't have to do anything in FileMaker to say save what the last character they were searching and save what they've got the table ordered by, because this is saved in the memory of the web viewer, and FileMaker maintains that state as well. So by simply using an option here which says kind of memorize state, then it knows to then restore that, because that's what we would expect in FileMaker. If we were to do a search in here and we were to search for test, go into a layout and go back, we would expect that layout to be in the same place that we left it. That's how, if we're maintaining good user interface, we wouldn't want to go back to there, have it show the whole list again, because the user might be working down a list of products or something that they're working kind of from that. So that's a very useful thing from that perspective. Does that make sense to everyone? Anyone got any questions about what we've looked at so far, or feel free to jump up with any questions or anything?
I had one, Gabriel. So I see you've implemented your own sort of browser history back button.
Oh yeah.
Button. And next to that, is that a plus for like a new window?
Yeah, so a new window inside of here. So yeah, that opens a new window that they then and each window then obviously has its own history in terms of here. So this is using, oh, it's a good question. It's some old custom functions that I came across. Browser nav, save in here. It's probably someone in this group who wrote it, but I've modified this slightly. This is a slightly older one. I've modified it to use like the window, to use the window name to store the history for each window. So in here, I use the bind. Where is it in here? One of these. I can't remember, it's in here somewhere. Here we go. So in here we've got a list with the records that are in. So this one is the first window in here. That's the tip for the next one, and then there is then the backwards history per window, which in here has the window name, the layout ID, and then the display name of the actual window itself. So what I do in that instance is, for instance, if you go into like a product page in here, if I go back, what I want to put in the tip is not necessarily just the layout that's on, but the name of that layout. So I use the Matt Petrowski method of putting it in an orange box off to the side of it with an evaluate self, which allows me to then quickly reference. I want to then say it's a product, and I want to put the product code and its name inside of there. So then as I'm clicking through my records in here, it's got my list of those product names in the history. If that makes sense.
Great,
so
thanks.
that again is one of those kind of things that's quite a pain to do, but from a user interface perspective, if people are used to using a web browser, you kind of think, yeah, I've got a forwards and backwards button and I've got a new window button. That's how people expect software to work. And kind of when it doesn't, that you kind of, it's one of those features that people could get around. People can go back from there, but those kind of little paper cut things that just annoys people that you can't go back to where you were, are those sort of things that kind of we find makes the difference between people really loving and using the software and people kind of begrudgingly having a tool that they're kind of forced to use, if that makes sense.
Gabriel, I have one question. This is an ambitious application. It looks fantastic. It's also, Jonathan was asking, doing this all in FileMaker. Well, obviously, there's some advantages using the web viewer and JavaScript in the way you have been. My other question is, why not go the other direction? What are the advantages as opposed to maybe just developing this in Node and React and living in a web app? What are the advantages that you see kind of in this hybrid space of FileMaker and the web viewer?
I think if I had a business which ran off a Node app and had like a MongoDB background or something like that, I would need someone who's a much better JavaScript developer than me, and I would need people who understand security and people who understand, all that type of stuff and the speed of development. Having built some relatively complex JavaScript applications, with the AI stuff now, the vibe coding stuff, you can kind of get to a proof of concept quite quickly, but you tend to very quickly give yourself enough rope to hang yourself, and it becomes so massively complicated. Like in FileMaker, to have a database that has, I don't know, quite a lot of this is going to make people cry. Quite a lot of table occurrences in here of this level of complexity. To try and build and maintain that in a flat database structure app I don't know if it would be possible, but I think you'd need a very big team to be able to do that. I think if you were to do that, you could then sell it for a lot less, but you would have to spend a lot of time and money building this, whereas I've built this pretty much entirely myself in 5-6 years or something like that. I certainly don't think I would have been able to build an app of that complexity in another platform. Does that make sense? Jeremy, you put your hand up. Are you frozen? I know you're frozen in there. Okay. Yeah. So we won't spend a lot of time on it because it's not super exciting, but customizable schedules, being able to have list of tasks that people need to do, be able to sign them off, and all sorts of bits and pieces like that. So a lot of the time when we do this, we have a kind of a configurator for each of these schedules. So we say we have a schedule layout. So we say, right, what types of events do we want to show on this calendar preset? We want to show processes. From what statuses do we want the orders to come from? Which particular processes do we want to include or not include on that? So all of this is like user configuration as to what these records are and which of them, where these are shown inside of here. Do we want to show a capacity inside of there? Do we want to have a list of a draggable source of events? So if we have a production schedule from here, we can see, right, here's all my orders for this week. I can see how much value this order is. I can see how much work I'm going to do. So in this one, I'm going to drag it in and drop it in here, all this type of stuff. And as I drag things around and put them on top of each other, I can see, how much work is involved with each of those. So if you are a production manager and you're looking to manage how many kitchens go through your workshop, then being able to move them around in here, and when we move the order, all the other related processes and dates and other bits and pieces all kind of driven from that. So yeah, you can do things like look at schedules for individual order. Let me find one that's got some stuff on it. Yeah, there's probably a lot of stuff that I won't go over now, just because there's a very large surface area of this kind of product, and some of it's not particularly exciting unless you're really into making kitchens. Then yeah, but being able to see which tasks are done, they're in a milestone, you can move the milestone around, and things can have all this type of logic, and we basically customize that kind of as much as possible. One of the ways we do that is a preference system. So when the user logs in, where's my data viewer gone? We build a JSON object of user preferences, which is called if I can remember what my things are called, preferences.json. Here we go. So with everything in the system, wherever anything needs to be changed per customer, what we do is then put that inside of a preference, which can basically be a flat piece of information. What time is the latest time you can send an APC business, chipping, whatever. It might just be a UUID of a record that says which particular record is it that happens over there. Or it may be something that's a calculation. So we use a lot of places where we actually store FileMaker calculations in here. So when we edit the line item, there's a FileMaker calculation here that says, right, well, if the order status is this, take it to here and not there. So in lots of places, product name is a good one. We have in here what is effectively FileMaker calculations, but are stored in data that basically allows us on a per system basis to say, right, well, in this instance do this, and if this instance do this, and if this instance is then do a whole load of, a let with a whole load of other bits and pieces and execute SQL and do all sorts of stuff. Is anywhere we try to put the customer specific logic wants to live in data, which then normally then gets wrapped in an evaluate to then produce the result of that, rather than having stuff saved in scripts or kind of layout logic and stuff like that. So that's a big thing that we do kind of quite a lot. So let's have a look at some of the 3D stuff, as that's always good fun. Let's have a look what we got. 870 product from here. So in our catalog we have products with parts and components, which if you imagine a kitchen cabinet is made up of, has a carcass, and it has a drawer, and it has frames and all other sorts of bits and pieces. Those tend to be parametrically sized, which basically means if the cabinet is wider, we need to make certain parts of that longer or shorter. Some parts stay the same depending on which dimension is kind of modified. So we have a big product catalog with parts and components have different frames, and they all have these calculations to determine the size of them. So there's a calculation here to determine how big it is in that instance. And that's fine, but it becomes quite difficult to visualize what those are. If you want to make 20 kitchens and cut them all on a CNC, you want to be able to cut all of the different materials from one particular thing, have those sizes be calculated, and then have them all kind of come out of the machine all in one go. So a few years ago, we built this kind of 3D cabinet visualizer functionality into FileMaker. So effectively, this is just a card window that loads. And basically in here, we've got the 3D representation of the product. So this is using a JavaScript library called 3JS, which is a kind of open source library that allows you to use the WebGL rendering engine to produce a 3D scene in here. So we have just a canvas tag in here that everything gets kind of drawn to in here. But what we want to be able to then do is be able to say, right, well, this instance, we're going to make this product wider. So as I increase the width of this, we're saying this is now wider. These top frame rails here have become wider because their size is driven by a calculation in here. So this is kind of, we do some sort of substitution in here. So like hash different characters, pull different information from different places. But these are effectively FileMaker calculations which get evaluated. So for all of these, each of these components, each of these parts and kind of components result in a calculated, and in this instance on the fly calculation to work out not just the size of each of these items, but actually what its 3D information is. So where's its position, where's its orientation, is it flipped, kind of etc. from there. So all of that work is done in FileMaker. So if I step through the script that generates this 3D view from here, where have we been called from? So we then look up some standard information in here, we'll look up some controls, and down here we will then have everything inside of this function in here, 3JS render perspective elements. So that returns what we call product JSON. In here. Which basically returns for every single component inside of here, they each have about, I don't know, about 80, maybe 50 odd different attributes based on what their calculation is, what parts they're part of, a bunch of IDs and bits and pieces like that. So this big JSON object is generated, in less than a second, but all of this comes from about 5 or 6 different tables, and actually some of this information is base64 encoded like 3D models. So you'll notice like the handles and the cup handles and stuff like that. We actually store the model of those in kind of plain text, and the system then generates these kind of blocks. So actually FileMaker is pretty fast at generating a block of text, which is, how many characters is that? It's going to be quite a few if I put it here. So quite a lot of characters when you look at it. FileMaker, if you have your calculations, configured properly, configured in an efficient way, is able to generate all of those stats in real time. So then actually the web engine itself that's drawing this model, if we have a look at the source in here, if I scroll all the way down here to the bottom somewhere, we'll see that, this is going to be a bit slow to load to look at the source of this. We'll see that actually it's drawing for every single component. It's funny, the syntax highlighting in the code is actually slower than actually rendering the 3D model. But effectively, each shape is drawn from basically point to point to point, extruded. It has a texture applied to it. It has lighting applied to it. It has all that kind of bits and pieces kind of inside of there, and that allows us to produce this real-time model, which then allows the users to then make sure that the product they're making, is the right size. We can produce plan views, so we can see with like dimensions or other bits and pieces, a top view, a side view, other bits and pieces like that. So when they're deciding how these calculations are set up to be configured for how the product is actually built, you can go in here and say, actually, what determines the height of that particular shelf in here? So I can see that now that is 400 mil up from the bottom. So I decide I want to have that shelf lower down. I'm going to change that in there. And this is going to then update and draw that shelf further down here from that. So this is a very, very useful tool to be able to allow the sort of production management to be able to kind of see that. So let's have a look at some other types of things. Look at a door maybe. So if we look at one of our customers sells hardwood doors, so we're building a front-end website for them that will kind of have a retail shop for this, but this allows us to choose different options. So we've got our door frame in here, we can open the door, bits and pieces like that, and we can choose actually what other different types of styles do we have. Maybe we have a style like this that has a different size glazed panel, and each of these different panels inside of it are all driven by which product options are kind of created. So you can see panels and other bits and pieces like that. And in here, what we're actually able to do is to say for each component, we're able to provide a custom shape for the extrusion. So you'll see in here like these, the sills in here are like they have a particular length, but they have a custom shape which determines actually how they look. This is how the doors and seals are actually kind of made. So if I turn off the head there, we'll see in terms of here, this element here has a custom shape inside of there. So I was thinking, how am I going to get a custom shape stored in text and store it and load it into FileMaker? So I thought, wow, scalable vector graphics, they seem like a good way to describe a shape. So effectively we can take a component model in here. Let's find something for the frame upright. So this effectively is produced from this SVG data inside of here, which is stored as data. So if one customer has some products which is shaped like this is all saved into the file as data, and then the code in here basically just takes this shape and follows each of these points and extrudes it into a three-dimensional shape, which is how we then able to build a complex 3D product, which is laid out and configured as it needs to be, but have all of that be kind of customer kind of specific information, where they may not have different shapes and different profiles for other bits and pieces. So that's cool and all, but it would be kind of cool if we could lay out, maybe draw an entire kitchen in this. So I started working maybe a year ago on this blueprint tool, which basically the idea being is that you can have someone, they can draw the layout, the design of a building, a kitchen or something like that, and then be able to lay out components inside of it. So we've got a kind of a 2D top-down view inside of here. I'm going to switch to layout mode here. This will now load each of my 3D models, which I've configured. So I can add a product from the catalog in here, and add it inside of it, and actually take these objects and move them around in three-dimensional space. So this is a library that I've been working on for a little while to basically allow me to take each of these models and lay them out in a, move their orientation, move them around, take a cabinet, there's two on top of each other there. It's probably not what you want. And stick it on the wall in here and put it around the corner, put it in here. Decide actually that window needs to be slightly over, it needs to be wider from here. I'll be able to kind of save this. So the number of challenges I had to kind of come across to be able to do this, because actually the amount of data that gets loaded inside of here is fairly significant. Each of these rendered 3D models is probably like 3, 4, 5, 6 megabytes of just pure text for each of those, for the actual geometry and kind of model information. So what I'm doing in this instance is I'm using Christian Smith's Monkey Bread software to allow this web view to be able to load files directly from disk. So what I do when the system runs, you can re-export the models, and basically it saves onto the user's desktop a bunch of these model files, which are like 3 or 4 meg each, because there's absolutely no way FileMaker server would be able to send that much information for the entire layout of a kitchen reliably to a web viewer with what may be several hundred megabytes worth of data, because it might have textures and other bits and pieces inside of there. So actually what we do is save out the standard 3D models into here, but then in some instances we might need to make a modification to that particular model. So it's not the standard one, we want to change the size of it. And this will then load up the kind of cabinet configurator customizer, which I can then change, make whatever changes required to this. Say I'd like to change the height of that top drawer in here from 300 to, let's make that 100, have a very narrow drawer at the top. So these are all FileMaker windows in here. This then goes off, changes a whole bunch of records in here, and then is going to then calculate the size of this, or I might just say I'm going to grab all of this and move it over. Now I can save this, and what this will do, this will call a function in the web viewer to load the 3D model information. So it's going to regenerate the scene from here. And then the web viewer itself is going to self-kick after a couple of seconds with a script which has been called with the actual data for that 3D model. So if we look at the parameter in here, the data viewer gets a bit unhappy when you have lots and lots of megabytes of raw text inside of here. So this basically is the entire 3D model of so this will be about 3 or 4 megs worth of text inside of here, which describes the entire 3D model itself. And then I use FileMaker to write that out to the user's desktop. And that's going to make a file down here based on the ID of that particular record, and that will then write out a new file onto my local folder, which then allows me to then add that into the scene. So I've made a change to that. it's generated all those records. So actually all the parts and components, those records have been updated inside of here, and then calls a script in here to load this, which hasn't worked for some reason. Probably because I had the script debugger open, it was opening that. But effectively now inside of a folder inside of here, we've got custom records which are for these particular orders themselves. So if I was just to take Blender, and open up these 3D model files, or one of them at least.
While that's loading, just curious why you're using the desktop and not the temp directory?
Because we wanted the user to be able to view the actual scene offline.
Okay.
So for the user having it in a folder in their desktop. So if I just import this file from here, I don't know which one I've imported, but here. So these are a standard 3D model file. Just got a squish door inside of here, but these is basically a file which is basically a text representation of a 3D model. So the reason I do it to the desktop is because I want these 3D models are cached. So there might be, you know, a few hundred megabytes worth of models, which they will only need, the user will only need to re-export once there's a change to the catalog. So if it's in the temp directory, then that at some point maybe gotten rid of. But actually what it allows them to do is in here, because what's loaded in here is just an index file. This actually is the same model as what's inside a FileMaker. So the idea being, we kind of yet to sort of do this yet, but the idea being that they could design a kitchen, export that as a file, put that somewhere hosted online. They could send that to the customer. The customer could receive a link, which, you know, has all of this model inside of it. They obviously wouldn't get all the edit controls and stuff like that, but they can have a look around their kitchen and see what's they're going to look like. And maybe they can click in here and say, add a comment to say, okay, could we have the sink over there or something like that. So the idea of this being a standalone file which contains everything that it needs to kind of produce that layout inside of it, you know, it's just a standard HTML file inside of there is something which we've not yet built, but it's something we want to be able to sort of look at. So yeah, we can see then obviously we can make a change and we can save that and we can switch between different design options. So I can load an alternate option in here, which is then going to load one with the kitchen over this side. And these, again, you'll probably hear me say this a lot, but are adjacent representation. So this is what the actual design looks like. I'll put that in text editor. Okay. So this describes the layout, it describes the size of the room, where its positions are, what the walls are, what textures they are on each wall, and then it describes then each item inside of the room, what the path to its model is, what its name is, some other information, its rotation and size, and some other bits and pieces inside of there. So the description of how the kitchen is laid out is in a sort of JSON representation. So effectively then, when I save the design from the web viewer, that configuration is then what gets saved into a record inside of here for this design. So then if I take this, move the fridge over and rotate it, then save that design. This is then a FileMaker window to be able to save it over the top of an existing design from there. And again, then we can produce different views, rendered like a shaded view or something like that, and we can then save those from a container into a container field inside a FileMaker. So then, if we were to go and search for this order, A46, we can then attach to that particular order the renders. So outside of here, we've got the invoices and other bits and pieces. We're able to then attach the renders so they can then be sent off to the client. You can accept the design, that's brilliant, come back and then continue with all the rest of the stuff. So kind of out of there, we then have a bunch of products with parts and components and other bits and pieces. So this is then all the records based on those customizations that get generated. Each product has a bunch of parts and components, and then all of this can be exported out to a CNC. It can go through all the different processes, when it's cut, when it's sanded, when it's sprayed, when it's finished. All of those have different processes kind of attached to it. So yeah, that's probably about 50 million miles an hour of kind of going through it. But I know sort of only sort of got an hour, so I thought, yeah, maybe anyone got any questions about anything?
Hey, Gabe, this is Rick Coleman. This is very, very impressive. Having been the product manager for the web viewer, I'm always thrilled to see how it's being leveraged over all these years. My question is, what are your thoughts on integrating semantic search or LLM into this? Is it something that you're considering?
At the moment, I don't have a use case for the semantic search, as we don't really have everything in the manufacturing industry is very much driven by codes, and everything has to be quite specific. We don't tend to have the find me something that's a bit similar to this. We use some of the we use OpenAI to generate what we call order kind of issue summaries. So we're able to kind of look at an order and say, let's put it back into planning. Where's it gone? Oh, there's a button that should be there. That allows us to just take that off for a second. I know it's gone. Do we used to generate basically to say what problems are there with this order, and we feed in a bunch of information like all of the processes and the line items, but that's more just like prompt engineering rather than necessarily the kind of semantic search kind of part of it. So yeah, at the moment, that's the conversations we've had with our customers is about getting insight into what problems might go wrong in manufacture, what orders might be late, because that's the thing they care about as a manufacturer. If an order should be 50% done by now, but something isn't done, then they want to be able to know that. So the LLMs are quite good at taking a bunch of orders, saying how bad a condition they're in, and then looking at lots of orders and saying which of these ones may cause me an issue, and it can say, well, this one should be at this process completed by now. So that's more of a data analysis sort of point of view than necessarily a building or setting up an order. I don't know if that answers your question, Rick.
Yep, thanks. Just was curious, but yeah, probably too narrow of a question because obviously it was beyond just semantic search. So I see how you're leveraging some of the AI to do some stuff. So that's interesting.
Yeah. So one of the things we've looked at is having the ability to allow the user to create their own report questions. So we have a system which we call our custom view builder, which allows us to basically, it's a bit like the data tables thing, but it allows them to make a report with whatever fields they want to from the database. So they can pick of all the different things that they could possibly want in an order, generate a layout that does that. So it doesn't need myself or one of my team to configure a custom report for them. They can pick it themselves. And at the moment, it's a bit fiddly, and it's a bit kind of finicky, in that if they want to do a custom query, they need to basically generate what ends up being a data API request, but they need to say order delivery date is greater than like, the first of the first. So it would be great to be able to have an LLM be able to look at a bunch of examples of this is the type of structure that data can be in, describe what you want, and we'll generate a custom report for you based on that. As they're always asking for, can we have one that shows this and grouped by this and ordered by this, and it's kind of, we've got those core features in there, but it would be really nice to be able to have a way to generate those automatically, where you can kind of have it create these records to determine how they're displayed in here, to say, right, well, when this is displayed, we want to put a pound sign in and, you know, put it in a local string and do it to 2 digits or whatever. And if they decide, oh, I want to see it to, you know, rounded to the nearest pound, then, you know, that's something, this type of JavaScript stuff is something the LLMs would be fantastic at being able to say, okay, yeah, great, here's how you can render that, you can do that from there. So I think that's where a lot of the opportunity comes, is a lot of that report building functionality, if that makes sense.
Other questions?
Gabe, how replaceable are you? If you got hit by a bus, do you have other team members or associates who could pick this up and say, oh yeah, I know what to do to fix that? Or do you have elaborate documentation to spin up, you know, new code developers? Or what's your sort of gestalt of,
yeah, it's a good.
Not allowed to go anywhere, and when he does, he has a bubble suit and 4 boxes.
So yeah, I mean, we're a small organization. You know, there's kind of 4 of us in the business. So obviously, any business that size, yes, there is a danger that if you lose someone, there's a lot of institutional knowledge kind of in there. I don't know what other people do. We kind of have a term in there that sort of says, well, you know, if we're unable to help you, then we can provide, you know, access to another third-party developer if you then want to. So because our licenses, as we sell it as a software as a service, we run the servers, we host it, they pay a per user fee to be able to use it, then effectively they don't have access to it. From that kind of perspective. So I mean, it's probably something we should be more aware of. I tend to be quite heavy in terms of writing comments in my code and bits and pieces like that. So
hey, let me jump in with a quick question if you're done there. Yeah. First side note, the browser nav, I dropped a link to that. Really good code. The British fellow, as a matter of fact. The Paul Jansen, good code, 3 versions. Have a look. By the way, brilliant, obvious what you're doing here. Question, JavaScript libraries. I'm taking notes. What other JavaScript libraries are you using that you'd like to give a shout out to besides the one that you mentioned?
The ones I'm using, I'll slide in here. The main ones we're using is data tables is the main one for all of the table stuff. With 3.js is the one we use for all the 3D visualizations. Full calendar is the one we use for all the kind of calendars and kind of schedule kind of bits and pieces kind of inside of there. I think that is mostly it. The one I use for the app mentioning is called Tribute, which is loaded, and one of the things I do in there with that is to generate all of the people's faces. When the system boots up, it gets a thumbnail and it base64 encodes a little an icon of each of those people. Because it's used in lots of places kind of across the system, I'd rather pay a little bit of cost on startup to put all of those into a global variable, so that then every time those web viewers load, they're fast, and it's not then having to request, you know, a company might have 200 employees, you don't want to be, you know, kind of requesting all of those. So that Tribute thing is slightly modified. There's not a lot to it, but a lot of the styling, it didn't support images and other bits and pieces like that. So I've done a lot of that.
Awesome. And final question from me: the pretty looking gauges that you had on the dashboard.
Yeah. Oh, the dashboards are high charts.
Awesome. And I guess I actually is all your JavaScript libraries local, or do you have a dependency on an internet connection?
No, it's all local. So yeah,
Awesome.
the
Okay, well done.
dashboards,
Thanks.
KPI dashboards in here. So these are done with high charts. So and again these are customer specific. So we have a bunch of records that get created every single day. And then these then allow you to summarize to say, I want to see this particular stat, but I want to see it over the last 1 day, week, month, and I want to compare it to the previous period. So I want to see how are my sales doing today versus last week versus this current period versus the last period. So we do that with basically a lot of fields in here, which is like a FileMaker calculation. So this SQL statement generates that stat. Every single day a record gets created with each of these, so it can be customer specific. They want a count or whatever, an average or whatever, it kind of is loaded inside of there, and then the dashboards are then generated. So
Yeah.
Gabe, you're also doing a mix, right? As I recall, you have some self-loading widgets and some that load via script, right?
Yeah, so I do, and there's probably not a good reason for that. Probably just over the time at which I made it, I did it in a certain way. And so, for instance, this layout here is actually eight web viewers with each of those that are self-booting. So they have a thing that kind of starts up. The one thing I would say that I do is in the startup, I set the web viewer template HTML. So I store all of the HTML code in a script effectively. So with an insert text script inside of here. So each of these contains, probably a few megabytes worth of text. So there is a little hack you can do with the insert text to get more text into there, which is something to keep an eye out for in the future. But this allows me that when I've got different versions of this file deployed, I know that the code with that version of the software works with this version of each of those libraries that get kind of set. So rather than loading that from a field, I put them all into a global field, so that then when I hit a layout, the HTML code for that particular widget type is in there, and then I will do either a self-booting or a substitution depending on the context to then do the to go off and kind of get that. So
I see Dave Knight has had his hand up for a little while. It's going to be our last question. So Dave.
Yeah, I just have sort of two questions that are somewhat related. Gabriel, by the way, again, fantastic solution and a lot of work behind this. My question is, what is an average deployment look like? I mean, are we driving 5 users for each instance or 50? And second, what's your average footprint in terms of storage for each instance? If you had to average it out among customers and so forth.
The number of users per system, it varies. Our bigger customers are probably like 65 users, something like that. We have quite a few that are quite small, that are maybe on a 5-user license. So it does vary, and those kind of in between. Obviously, our model is a per user, so that kind of depends. In terms of the actual file size that they're in, I mean, our biggest customer, who we've worked with for a long time, a company called Deval Kitchens, their database is, I don't know, 25 gigs, something like that. So they're at the stage now where they've got millions of records in a lot of the tables. So we've done a lot of work to make it fast for that number of records, but they're making 2 or 3 million pounds worth of kitchens every single month. So there's a lot of records that can go through there. Some of our smaller customers, not all of them use all of the software. So a lot of them don't use, they don't need the product catalog. They use it just from a order processing management. So they're not generating individual components. So they use certain parts of it, but we sort of found that lots of people need different parts of it. And for some of them, we found our point in the market is a company probably needs to have a minimum of 15 employees for our software to be financially viable for them, the cost we charge versus the amount they make. There's a lot of smaller, certainly in the UK, there's a lot of smaller customers who are just retailers who aren't making stuff themselves. They're selling it, they're buying it in someone, they're buying in standard stuff from someone else. And for us, that's not cost viable for them. There's other off-the-shelf solutions which are cheaper. And then at the very, very big end, there's customers who have spent, 25 years building custom software in whatever. And, the big box retailers, they tend to not need it bespoke. You're just selling boxes of stuff. And, you'd have a nice fancy visualizer. You go to IKEA, they'll give you a visualizer to drag stuff around, but they're all the same. You can't change those products at all. So for us, it's customers who mostly do manufacturing, do a lot of bespoke where they need that customization. If you're just selling standard box, standard size widgets, then there's a lot more options out there. For us, it's where they need that flexibility, where a solution like ours is worth the cost compared to other options.
Great. Thank you so much, Gabriel. That was really, really impressive. Obviously, a huge amount of work has gone into this. Great to see it sort of paying off so nicely. I was thinking, I think everyone who's done custom development over the years in FileMaker has had that customer, or many customers who've said, just build this for me and you'll be able to sell it to hundreds of people. And 99 times out of 100, that's not really accurate. You're just building them a custom solution. But it's great to see that this is the one, at least one time where you started out building something, it sounds like, for one customer, but you were able to broaden it to be able to sell it to lots of customers. So
yeah, I think because we knew from the very start when we first made it for that first customer, the conversation with them was always, we were going to make it. You make certain decisions and you always later come back and you think, this won't ever need to change, it'll always be this way. And then you end up with an indefinite number of things, and things become kind of more complex. But
right. No, it's great to see that.
Couple of quick questions. Vince was a thing about updates. So the way we do every 2-month updates. So we roll out a new version to our customers with new features. Every two months we do internal testing. We roll it out to them. They get a testing version they can play with it ahead of the release. Kind of from there, we found that sort of cadence works well, and our pricing is based that all of the customers get all of the products. There's no segmentation in there, so they can use new features if they want to or not. So yeah, and we use Otto to do the deployment, which we couldn't live without. So yeah.
Okay, good. Shout out to our later presenter. All right, thanks again, Gabriel. Really appreciate it. Great work. We're going to switch now over to Chris Moyer with our monthly segment of the Tech News Roundup. Take it away, Chris.
Okay. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
All right. Okay, welcome to the April edition of the Tech News Roundup. I guess we'll just jump right in. So very recently, last week or the week before, we had FileMaker Server version 21.1.3, and an earlier iteration on the 20 version as well got released. A lot of bug fixes in this, some FileMaker Server script engine processes, web publishing engine processes. There have been some reports. I've known a couple people and have seen stuff online about problems with perform script on server session throttling, specifically sort of being limited by the number of cores available on server. So for people who make significant use of perform script on server, I would probably wait on this update, but that's news. In the world of iOS, for those of you who have not yet updated to iOS 18.4, that's probably a good call because they've been finding bugs with it, especially for people who like to use their phone in the car. There have been major problems with CarPlay. Bunch of people on Reddit and on X. The now playing information on CarPlay no longer shows up. Linkage connections, connecting and disconnecting over and over again when using wireless CarPlay. One Honda driver says it takes plugging and unplugging 5 times and restarting the car to get CarPlay to connect since updating to iOS 18.4. And so these sorts of issues appear to be happening with multiple automakers: Honda, Mazda, Audi, Ford. I think I saw one about VW as well. So supposedly 18.4.1 that fixes these bug fixes, or that contains these bug fixes, is coming soon. So don't update to 18.4, wait for 18.4.1. And then also on the iOS front, I think this is actually a video here. Let me see if I can run this. So 9to5Mac did a write-up on this with the new design look coming for iOS 19. It's sort of, for those of you who've seen Vision OS, this is sort of a movement in the direction of the design aesthetic of Vision OS. Some elements will shimmer as the user moves the device. The tab view, which is what they call the tabs inside of apps, will look a lot like how it works in Vision OS. The bar in apps like Music and App Store will float on the screen with a new interface for the search tab. So let me see if this will play here.
Hey, I'm glad you clicked on the video. You're about to see the big
I didn't want to see that.
featuring a total redesign that looked a lot less like iOS and more like Vision OS, the system that runs on Apple's Vision Pro.
Okay, you get the idea. I don't want to bore you with the whole video. It's a 10-minute long video, but for those of you who are interested in seeing what's coming down the pike, I would check it out. The guy's channel is Front Page Tech. The guy is John Prosser. Apparently, there's been some sniping back and forth between someone at Apple, I believe, saying, no, that guy's got it all wrong. And he keeps coming back saying, oh, no, I've got it right. And here's the proof. So should be interesting. It's fun popcorn event kind of thing. And then speaking of the iPhone, there was an interesting article on 9to5Mac about the boring era coming to a close. They have 3 significant models. There's going to be an iPhone 17 Air, ultra thin design, significantly slimmer than the current models, unique screen size. Next year is the cool one. The one that I'm looking forward to is the iPhone Fold. They're going to have not just an iPhone Fold, but an iPad Fold. So you'll have the sort of hybrid experience, actually. So iPhone can give you the scale that you're now getting with a iPad. The iPhone Fold will be 7.8 inches, and the iPad Fold will be 18.8 inches. And then either in 2026 or 2027, Apple is apparently preparing a iPhone 20th anniversary model. And they're being cryptic about it, but they're saying things like makes more extensive use of glass. So maybe this thing will be partially translucent. And then regarding the iPhone 17 coming out, these are some of the new cases that are coming out, and you will notice the opening for the cameras on the back of the thing are gigantic. There's one theory that the edge-to-edge camera bar is going to be needed to accommodate a more capable telephoto camera, so perhaps significantly enhanced telephoto, but who knows? It could be LiDAR, more extensive LiDAR stuff for 3D imaging. So Apple is expected to use the camera bar design similar to the Google Pixel phones on the 3 models in September: iPhone 17 Pro, the 17 Pro Max, and the thinner iPhone 17 Air. All right. Also, speaking of Apple, interesting research out of George Mason University. They had a research team there. You can see these professors in the Department of Computer Science. They have developed a hack that they have dubbed en route tag that has about a 90% success rate. It's not 100%, but basically you can take any device that has Bluetooth capability. We're talking, laptops or even Bluetooth headphones, and convincing the Apple network that it is an AirTag device. And so if you were a stalker and you managed to use en route tag on somebody's headphones, you would be able to use the Apple Find My network to track these people anywhere on Earth. So that's a problem. They have been in touch with Apple about this. They recommended to Apple that they update their Find My network so that it is a little more rigorous about verifying devices on the network. But they say a true fix may take years to roll out. Um, and Apple has officially acknowledged it in subsequent security updates, but apparently some of the older tech out there may take years to sort of work its way out of the ecosystem. So this could be a problem that's around for quite a while. And then I think last month or the month before that, we were talking about the Microsoft Majorana quantum chip that they had talked about. Apparently, a ton of researchers in this area has said they're full of it, and they have done nothing of the sort in terms of creating this new chip in this new state of matter. Microsoft's claims rest on the fact that they have created these new exotic quasi-particles called Majorana Zero Modes, or MZMs. They can theoretically be used to create a topological qubit, which is a new type of quantum bit that they said they made an 8 qubit chip. And they published a paper in the journal Nature that said they have confirmed these results, and they've claimed that the Nature paper marked peer-reviewed confirmation that Microsoft has not only been able to create them, but can also reliably measure that information on them. So basically create and read from them. But the editors at Nature have completely disputed this. They said this statement is not correct. It has not been peer-reviewed. The editorial team wishes to point out that the results in this manuscript do not represent evidence for the presence of Majorana Zero modes in the reported devices. So a little bit of a hubbub about Microsoft's splashy announcement about quantum computing. Since we're on the Microsoft topic, some sort of interesting news. Early in the year, we were talking about how there has been a massive build out of data centers just because of all the demand of computing power and electronic power to drive those data centers for the AI spin up. And it seems to be that, at least Microsoft and probably some others are pumping the brakes on all this massive build out. So they had $1 billion data center campus. I think it was going to be comprised of 3 or 4 data centers in central Ohio near Columbus. And the president of Microsoft's cloud operations, Noel Walsh, described the current expansion as the largest and most ambitious infrastructure scaling project in the company's history. And they have now taken steps to delay that. They basically paused it. They haven't killed it or anything like that, but it's basically on mothballs at the moment. They did the same for a similar project in Wisconsin, and they have canceled some U.S. leases for third-party data center capacity. So perhaps the customer demand has plateaued, and they've decided that this isn't going to scale up on the trajectory they thought, but it's just sort of an interesting data point in the world of AI that, the sky is not the limit, that there does seem to be a limit on to customer uptake of AI capacity. Google, also a powerhouse in the world of LLMs and AI. Some of you have probably been dabbling in the new arena of vibe coding. Cursor AI, which is an IDE similar to VS Code for those of you who use VS Code. And you can actually use VS Code with add-ons to do LLM-assisted coding in that as well. But Cursor has sort of taken the developer community by storm. They're valued at about 10 billion these days. They have an AI-powered integrated IDE. And it's really nice to work with. But Google has responded to this. They have created or launched what they've called Firebase Studio. It's currently in preview mode right now. You can go Google it and find it and have a look at it if you like. I think I have a clip of the documentation here. So here's some of the write-up on it. Here's what it looks like. And if you were to see the full screen, you'd see a little preview note in the corner of it. But Looks interesting. I have not had a chance to mess with it yet. I think this is a very recent announcement, probably in the last couple of days or so. But just an FYI for those of you who are using LLM assisted coding practices these days, there is a new player in town. Meta, just over, I want to say last weekend. Yeah, I think it was just last weekend. They announced Llama 4, and they're dubbing it the Llama Herd. They have Llama 4 Behemoth, they have Llama 4 Scout, and they have Llama 4 Maverick. And apparently, the Llama 4 Maverick was specifically trained, overfitted basically, to score well on LM Arena, which is a site hosting chatbots. Meta made much of this in the thing. Apparently, this isn't even an official model that you can use. So they basically built a purpose-built model to score well on this one metric, and then they don't even release it. And there is apparently a rumor going around that internal to Meta that there's been some disappointment that these models have not been, they've been struggling to deliver performance. There's no evidence that's been produced to substantiate that rumor, but it's been making the rounds. And so there's a little bit of a cloud hanging over Meta's Llama 4 announcement, because they've never done shenanigans like this, for lack of a better term, in previous releases. It's always been open source. Here you go, have at it. And so they've built up a lot of credibility, and this is kind of a cloud over their forthrightness at the moment. So there's that. I would say that I think they're gunning for Google. Gemini 2.5 has sort of taken over the crown of the best coding LLM. And I think they felt pressure to come out and counter that narrative. And here we are. So my vote is officially for Gemini 2.5 at the moment. In this article on futurism, and this is about OpenAI, GPT 4.5, has actually officially passed the Turing test. And so for those of you not familiar, the Turing test is used to have a person identify whether or not they're talking to a bot or whether or not they're talking to a person. And the OpenAI GPT 4.5 model was deemed to be the human 73% of the time when it was instructed to adopt a persona, which I think is sort of an interesting wrinkle to that. And random chance is 50%. So the finding is that the Turing test has resoundingly been beaten. People are no better at chance than distinguishing humans from GPT 4.5 and Llama with the persona prompt. According to the lead author, Cameron Jones, who's a researcher at UC San Diego's Language and Cognition Lab. And there's an X thread about the work if you want to check it out. And then there's also this futurism article if you want to read more about it. But we're getting run over by the LLMs. It's just a matter of time. Speaking of, people who tend to use ChatGPT a lot, these are like the super user or super consumers, McDonald's people who ate at McDonald's every day. So power users were studied by the OpenAI team and MIT to sort of figure out not only how they felt about the chatbot, but also to study what sort of effective cues, meaning aspects of interactions that indicate empathy, affection, or support, they used when chatting with the chatbot. And they found that while the vast majority of people surveyed didn't engage emotionally with ChatGPT, those who use the chatbot for longer periods of time seemed to start considering it to be a friend, air quotes. The survey participants who chatted with it the longest tended to be lonelier and get more stressed out over subtle changes in the model's behavior. So they would sort of pick up on unevenness in tone in their interaction with the model, which is interesting. So Don't overuse the chatbot, apparently. And this one is just an odd one, and it gets into stuff that ripple effects that I wasn't even aware that were there. So this is about the Ukraine-Russia war. And apparently Russia has been using some GPS guided weapons against Ukraine, and Ukraine has figured out how to spoof GPS signals and basically make the weapons think they were over Ukraine when they were really over Russia, and have the weapons attack Russian positions. And this apparently has caused all sorts of havoc in the world of um, GPS technology. So a whole bunch of different organizations: International Telecommunications Union, International Civil Aviation Organization, International Maritime Organization, have pointed out that interference with the four largest global navigation systems, which are the US GPS, the EU Galileo system, the Russian GLONASS system, and the Chinese Baidu system, not only affects positioning in aviation, shipping, and land transport, but the precise time signals are also important for financial transactions, communications, power grids, things like that. Science and disaster relief and rescue services are affected if these signals are disrupted or falsified. But I had no idea that international financial transactions were making use of the timing signals from GPS. Jeremy, you have a question? Oh, your hand was up. So anyway, just the more you know kind of thing. I thought it was an interesting artifact of our larger technology ecosystem. There's a ton of breaches out there. I can't count. It's several hundred or maybe even thousands at this point in the year of data breaches and ransomware attacks and stuff like that. But I thought this one in particular was interesting because Oracle's kind of a big dog. So some time ago, Oracle acquired a U.S. healthcare organization called Cerner. That's a healthcare software as a service company. They did electronic healthcare record management and business operations systems. Oracle bought them in 2022. They were merged into Oracle Health. Their systems were migrated to Oracle Cloud, but apparently their legacy systems were just sort of stashed somewhere. And a threat actor used compromised customer credentials to breach the servers where the old stuff was stashed sometime after January 22nd in 2025, and copied that data to a remote server. Oracle's position is that the stolen data may, air quotes, may, have included patient information from electronic health records. However, multiple sources told Bleeping Computer, who's the reporter of this story, or published this story, that it has been confirmed that patient data was stolen during the attack. So who knows whose health records are out there. And then I want to end on a positive note, just about environmental science, pollution, things like that. A new form of plastic has been discovered that will dissolve in the ocean. So the ocean is full of microplastics from disintegrating plastic refuse in the ocean. But a research organization called Riken in Japan has discovered a new type of plastic. After screening a range of molecules, they identified a particular combination of sodium hexametaphosphate, which is a common food additive, and monomers based on guanidinium ions, easy for me to say, which are used in fertilizer. So you have a food additive and you have a fertilizer component. When you mix these two compounds together in water, they form this viscous goo that can be dried to form plastics. And when they react together, they form salt bridges between the molecules that make the material strong and flexible, like plastic. However, when you soak them in salt water, the electrolytes unlock those bonds and the material just decomposes to its original constituent components. So there is a new ocean-safe plastic that has been developed, and I just think that's good news, and that's all I got.
Chris, I just had a notice from one of my healthcare providers. I'm trying to remember which one, and I'm not remembering, but they sent me a notice that they had been using Google Analytics for years on their website to provide a better user experience. And It turns out that a lot of their information was exposed to Google Analytics. They said that there hadn't been any bad actors or hostile intent and that the information had not been released. And I just said to myself, yet, but Google has it all. So,
That's what
yay.
you want. You want
Yeah.
Google knowing everything about your medical history.
Yeah, really. So there you go.
So Chris, regarding the last item, were you saying that the future is plastics?
The future is plastics that will dissolve in salt water, which I think is a cool discovery. And so I'm happy to report that little bit of science breakthrough.
Nice. Well, thank you as always for informing us and alternately terrifying us. It's a community service that you do. Let's see, time for announcements. I know John Howell, you had an announcement you wanted to share with the group.
I do. I'm gonna let Mike Ross give it for me.
Yep, just testing, make sure you can hear me fine.
Yep, gotcha.
And I'm just gonna quickly share my screen if that is allowed.
You should be able to.
Just kind of bring up the website here. So we are happy to announce that we have a new unconference that is coming your way that we are doing in the Silicon Valley area. It was slated for October 20th to 23rd to the 23rd this year. We are calling this Full Access, and we're doing this in the spirit of Pause on Air, who is not putting on an unconference this year. We're generating a lot of enthusiasm for this. This is John Howell and I are the part of the steering committee, but what I'd like to tell you about this conference is that this will be in an intimate setting and it'll be community led. It's by developers for developers. We will have an emphasis on collaboration, empowerment, and growth. And once again, October 20th through 23rd of this year. Just to kind of let you know that there are plenty of opportunities for sharing your ideas and your challenges. We're holding this at a small retreat center. Well, that's not so small, but you can actually see it down below on the website here. It's a Jesuit retreat center. Plenty of opportunities to make new connections. I think that's really good. We're trying to make this very affordable for a 3-night event. The registration is under $1,000. We have a couple tiers of pricing. We have this $1,000 and below includes room and board. So it's kind of one-stop shopping. We have single rooms available for $9.95, double rooms where you're sharing with one person for $8.95. And since we're near Silicon Valley, we've also opened up for commuter options, and the commuter fee will also include meals. So we have that option. We feel that there's a lot of people in the nearby community. This retreat center is only about 7 miles away or so from Apple headquarters, but you're going to feel like you're out in the country. We give you a few more little quick details. We will have a pretty broad focus on Claris technologies, and we're going to talk about skills we need to develop. We're going to talk about complementary technologies. We will also have a lot of work-life challenge sessions. Those are the type of sessions that really are not appropriate at a venue like Engage. This is where we have a chance to kind of get real with each other. And there will also, once again, meals and snacks. We're not trying to make a profit off this. We're an all-volunteer team. We will basically, let's see if there's anything. I got to run through some slides here real quick. So I would actually entertain some questions if you have it. We actually gave a presentation last night at Dig FM that was 2.5 hours long. So there's lots of details, but I just kind of was going along the surface here. And if there are any questions, please ask.
Mike, let me interrupt real quick. I just noticed
Sure.
on the Dig FM YouTube channel, which is youtube.com, at Dig FM, they have posted the core hour of our presentation last night, so that's available. People are signing up. Registration opened a week ago. People are signing up. We're just hoping to populate it with lots of wonderful people, including senior people and new people who are learning the platform. We're trying to give an opportunity for everybody to be kind of in a leveling platform where we can all be there together. So registration is open. And
Great.
that
I see
video
there's
is
a link.
really one rich meeting we had. We went on for 4.5 hours in discussion last night over this event. So there seems to be a lot of enthusiasm building behind the scenes.
I see there's a link to that YouTube video in the chat that Eric Matthews posted. So
thank you.
Anyone who wants more information can certainly watch that video and pick it up from there. Thanks for sharing. Anything else? Any other announcements before we go into breakout rooms? Going once, going twice. All right, I'm going to set up breakout rooms. We're going to go about 10 minutes there, and then we'll come back. So go ahead and join your rooms.
Please do a breakout room.
All right, so our next presentation is by Todd Geist. We were reminiscing a little bit before the meeting started about, the old days of meeting in person, back in the dark ages, maybe the pre-pandemic ages. But anyhow, Todd, you presented at FMDiSC probably more times than I can count. It's great to have you back, and I'll hand the floor over to you to
Right. All right. Well, thanks for having us.
Did you start the recording again?
I did. Thanks.
I'm going to share a portion of my screen here, and hopefully you guys can see.
Yep.
See this section over here. So I'm going to talk. We're going to talk about a couple things today. One is automatic, and with a focus on auto FMS. So this is part of our web hosting platform. We were feel very honored to win the innovation award for 2 years in a row on this product. So it seems to be catching on. As you can see a little bit below here, where are my stats not showing up on this? There we go. Auto FMS is running on 2,600 servers right now today. So this is 2,600 servers around the globe. Some in the UK from our earlier presenter talked about using Auto. And we've got customers all over the place. I believe that Gabe is just using Auto on his own infrastructure, not using. I don't think you're using automatic. Chime in if you are. But it's become really popular, and we're really gratified for that. I mean, that was kind of our idea. One of the big things we did was make it free last year, because we felt that this kind of tool just is super useful to just make available to the community and let people do things like what Gabe is doing, like build a business around deploying custom FileMaker solutions to many customers. But also, if you're just running, if you're running a consulting shop, or if you're doing or if you're just an in-house developer, being able to do this sort of standard software development lifecycle of dev servers, staging servers, and production servers really easy. It was definitely a goal of Auto FMS. So I do want to tell you before we get into Auto FMS, just to talk about the thing that we actually make money on, because almost everything that I'm going to tell you, matter of fact, after I get done with about this 2 or 3 minutes here, everything that we're going to show for the rest of the presentation is completely free. So you don't need to pay us anything to use really anything that we're about to show you, unless you want to actually spin up a server in the cloud. And so we do FileMaker hosting, and we have various pricing, various sizes, everything from very small to very large, including really awesome things like bare metal servers, which if you're running WebDirect or other really high activity servers, you really still cannot be bare metal. The pricing to performance level is way better than you can get on any VM or any Docker container. And so we're one of the only hosting, I think we're the only hosting provider that provides bare metal servers. We also have we have 32 data centers around the world, so you can be close to your customers. Yeah, so that's automatic, and something I'm not. We do have, as we showed up here, there's over 10,000 FileMaker files currently running on the automatic platform, and so that is just our hosted servers. There's 10,000 files going there. A couple more stats before we get into some more cool demos. So last month, people like Gabe deployed over 12,000 FileMaker files using AutoFMS. So that is moving something from dev to production or dev to staging or something like that. Quite a lot. And this number has been growing pretty rapidly. You know, it's gone up, I think just in the last couple of months, it's gone up by another 2,000. So it continues to gain popularity and people continue to use it. And we just think that's great. We're just thrilled that it's become sort of a standard thing that people feel they can rely on to build out their businesses. So we're pretty thrilled with that. Before I jump into some demos, any questions on automatic? I can't see, how do I get my settings to show more people so I can see more hand raises? Here we go. All right. If anybody has a hand raise, or let me know. All right. Groovy. Let's have some fun. So I'm going to show a couple things, and then Kyle's going to take over, and we're going to go a little deeper into what we call our cloud console and AutoFMS in particular, and also auto deploy. So let's say that you are, where's my other web page? Here it is. Let's say that you have a FileMaker vertical and you want to allow people to go from your website, and let's say you have a vertical that they can deploy, they can download and deploy on their servers. Maybe you don't self-host, or maybe you just want to make a demo available that they can put onto, that they can install onto their server. So you've got a beautiful website that explains how you are going to win the sales domination game, and you've got all your beautiful stuff shown on your landing page. Why people would choose Highlander, trusted by sales leaders worldwide. And then down here it says, oh, interesting, you can run Highlander on your own FileMaker server. And then it says with a single button. Now remember, this is your website. So this is not our stuff at all. This is your website, and you can put a button on it that says deploy now. And so this will work with any FileMaker system that you want. And we're going to show you how to get that set up later. We click a button. We're going to go to a page on the internet. I'm going to enter in my URL to my, so it's basically saying, put your server in. Now, of course, your server has to be running AutoFMS. That is the one thing. Put your server in. And right now it's saying enter an API key. If you used AutoFMS or auto deploy, you know what API keys are. We're going to make this a little simpler to just let you do to put in your server credentials. So this is your admin console credentials, but I'm just going to pop in an API key. I'm going to click test the connection. It is going to say we are ready to go. Here are the 3 files in this system, Highlander. I can choose to rename the files if I wanted to, and it would actually, if using some regex, you could rename the files and you could deploy, and it will actually auto deploy and AutoFMS will maintain those internal file references between the files for you. I click deploy, and just like that, boom, the deployment is happening on the FileMaker server, and these files will be deployed in just a few minutes as we sit here and watch. So this is something that we've been kind of working towards for a long, long time in terms of just like making it really easy for people to deploy a FileMaker system onto a FileMaker server. Like it should just be, you should be able to have a website that says deploy now, click a button and have it land on the server. And then your server can open up and your files can open up on the server and they can just get started, right? So we just released this feature. We're really excited about it. It says it's all done. And if I go look at my FileMaker server and go look at the databases on there, I can see that those files are installed, and I can click a button here to open them. I'm not going to go into the actual solution here. We may look at it a little bit later, but I hope you get the point that this is one button to get you started, and your users or your customers or you could use this internally if you just want to, if you're a dev shop and you want to make it really easy to deploy your starter solution to anybody who's got AutoFMS running. You just put a button on a web page or just trigger a simple URL and you're off and running. So let me stop there and see if there are any questions or comments. Crickets.
Awesome.
We think it's pretty awesome. I hope that this gives people an opportunity to build, what we hope is that eventually people are sharing their starter files and their demo files and their utility files and whatever. They can just share them in a really easy way for people to get stuff deployed. And obviously it's not every FileMaker server, but it's 2,600 servers and growing, which is a lot. And so we hope people can.
Quick question, Todd.
Yeah.
Would it be possible to have it deploy and set up an automatic cloud instance for them? So let's say
so that's obviously what we're working on next, right? So we kind of take an approach with all this stuff that we enable sort of anybody to use the tools, sort of using their own infrastructure and their own websites and their own whatever to get set up and going. And they can do that. And then of course we will add on, when you click this button, you'll go to one of the options will be spin up an automatic server, or log into if you're already logged into automatic, choose the server you want to deploy, that kind of thing. But we could absolutely add that capability to spin up a server and install those files on it, because we already have all of the hooks based on our global platform. You could basically say, choose a data center, choose a server size and just go, and then enter your email. And when it's done, you'll get the login to the files. However, you as a vertical market person might want to happen, we can set that up. So that's coming as we work through this, but that's the initial step, is put a button on your website. The button is, this is the website I built. By the way, this entire landing page here was vibe coded in about 3 minutes using Cursor and the standard sort of Next.js, ShadCN stack that we use all the time. So I didn't actually write any of this. This was just, hey, make me. You can probably see probably have in history here. Yeah. So here I said, make a nice landing page, and I gave it some prompts, and it pretty much just went and wrote the whole thing for me. So that was good. Didn't take me that long to make this demo site, but you get the idea. But this link is just, it's just an href. I don't know if you can see this here, but it's not. Wait a minute, where is it? Where's the one? Somewhere on this page. Deploy now. Yeah. Here it is. So that's the link.
Pro? Are you using the Pro version of Cursor?
Yes. Yeah. We make heavy use of Cursor. Pretty much all day, all the time. So yeah. So we're going to show you later how to make a build with auto deploy and AutoFMS. And basically at the end of that build, you get a manifest file. And you can see this here. It's just a JSON file. You put that up with the build on any URL anywhere, and you make a link to it, and people can just deploy onto AutoFMS. So I'm going to stop my share there. And if there's not any more questions, I am going to turn it over to Kyle to do some more in-depth walkthroughs on deployments and builds and such. We good?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, take it away.
Sounds good. Let me share my screen. Everybody see my screen? Awesome. So, go ahead. Yeah. Okay. So Todd showed up a tiny bit about AutoFMS. I guess just generally, AutoFMS intends to make the development lifecycle easier. It is not a full replacement for the admin console. It's not intended to be that. It's intended to be kind of an extension of the abilities of the admin console. So there's a lot of stuff in here that you could do if you were SSH'd into the server. You could use the FM developer tool to do all of the saving as XMLs and clones and downloading and all of that stuff. But it gives you a web console and allows you to do a bunch of stuff that you couldn't do without having direct access to the server. So if you have a hosted server or if you, et cetera, should make all of that stuff easier. Great log viewer, some stuff like that. Let's talk a little bit more about the development lifecycle. So the AutoFMS, where's my FileMaker? So this is auto deploy. I guess let's clarify that. This is auto deploy. This is AutoFMS. Auto deploy is a FileMaker file running a web viewer. This is all web viewer. And this is using the AutoFMS API, which is a developer API that is exposed and you can use admin API keys to access. It uses the developer API to perform builds, deployments, manage your files using those, and all that kind of thing. So the thing Todd showed you was deploying a build from a URL using a deployment. A build you can think of basically as a set of backups. So this one we're going to run on my dev, so I'll turn it on the prod server so I can make a build of those ones that Todd just showed. And so this connects to my prod server, maybe. Okay, my API key is broken. That's fine. So we'll do it on the dev server. And so you can select a set of files from here. We'll grab some of my test API files. And you can see I use this file a lot for testing. And so a build is basically a set of clones or copies of files that you can use to run deployments, or you can publish to offsites, or you can store as historical sets of your files, or really anything you need a set of files for, right? You can configure options for them, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm just going to create a set of copies, and we'll call this demo. And I'm going to increase the compression level a little bit, and memory level a little bit. You can run scripts and you can close them. There's a bunch of extra things. I am going to close them during this build, and I'm going to include the container data. So we'll review and build. Pops up this thing. I'm going to start it. So I'll show you live logs of what's happening. So builds essentially will make a backup of your file and zip them into a zip file. It's a little more complicated than that. That's all you really need to know about them. This one's really fast because they're tiny files. But so I now have a build called demo, which has my test API and my test API staging files. That took 8.5 seconds. And then if I go into deployments, I can make a new deployment. I can call it demo. We're going to turn on advanced options. And I'm going to go from my dev server to my staging server. I'm going to use the demo build. And I'm going to select files. We'll select them all. Save that. And you can see here it shows that I have copies. I don't need to add any credentials because I'm just doing installs. If these files were encrypted, which they're not, I could add the encryption keys so that they could be opened on the destination. But this is basically going to grab the zip file that I made on my dev server, move it over to my staging server, and put them there. So there's a bunch of extra options here. So you can run the scripts before and after and close stuff and all that stuff. But we're going to transfer the container data, and that's about it. We'll review and deploy this. We'll start it. And you'll see here, so I had the install/replace option. So this will dynamically figure out if the files that I'm sending are already on the destination server. And if they are, it will replace them. And if it's not, it will install them. You can set it up to only install, and it'll throw a little error if you already have the files there so that you don't accidentally overwrite anything. But you'll see here, so it closed my files, moved the build across, unzipped the build, made backups of my existing files if they were there, installed the new files, opened the files back up, and then it's done. So that took 24 seconds to move those two files across. And I did, I said these are pretty small. If I go back here, yeah, so that's a deployment. We'll say that. There's also some interesting stuff in here that you can do that makes your life easier. So if you're having any connection problems between servers, you can test server connections. It's like, oh my gosh, your servers can connect to each other. One of the more common problems with AutoFMS is like if your prod server is behind a firewall that your dev server can't access, then you might need to change some deployment settings so that it can all be kind of orchestrated from the prod server instead of having to communicate both directions. So there's some interesting things like that. I'm going to hop over into AutoFMS really fast, so just to show you some stuff. AutoFMS, we talked about this. This is, you can see deployments. We run the prod server, so you can see this deployment we just ran here. Oh, sorry, I deployed to the staging server. You can see this deployment we just ran here in the deployments tab. My staging server is being slow today. But so this demo deployment we just ran, you can see the full log, like we said. You can see the build log that I ran earlier. So this grabbed the build from the source server, put the manifest and put the log in here so you could see it. And yeah, so this installs your files. If an install fails for some reason, it'll revert to the original file that was there. It does migrations too. So if you do data migrations, you can do those. This also has a build log. So I'm on my dev server. You can see this build I ran here and all this information and sizes and things like that. You can also browse files on the server. You can manage API keys. There's a data API and admin API proxy. Webhooks, which we haven't really touched on, but are great for interacting with third parties. There's some stuff you can do with the admin API here. So you can do database client and service management. A lot of the abilities that you have in here, there are some that do use the admin API, but there's a lot that is not available through the admin API that you can do. So you can move files around, you can download copies and clones, you can save files as XML, you can encrypt and decrypt files right from this UI, as well as pausing and closing and all that kind of stuff. And the services, you can start and stop the services on the server. We have a great log viewer. And then there's some settings you can manage. There's offsite backups. I don't know. There's a bunch of stuff in here. Let's just say that.
Hey, let's pause for a second to see if anybody has any questions or if anybody is not certain what they're seeing here. Because I think if you haven't seen, at first, has anybody not seen Auto before? And this is like, I don't know what's happening. And don't be shy because, it's if you haven't seen it and you haven't had a chance to work in this way, this could look very mysterious and very like, why are we doing this? Like, what's the point of doing all this stuff? So we got one first time seeing it. So just to make sure that what we just saw there kind of really gets in is what we're basically doing is completely automating the process of moving files from server to server, right? So that opens up all different kinds of use cases. We have people using this to do like to do warm failover servers. So every few hours they send files from their production server to a file that's to a different server that's just there in case something happens to their main server. And of course, we have people doing a lot of data migrations and vertical market deployments. We have a lot of people using it for that. But just the ability to kind of script opening and closing and copying and downloading these kinds of all the files from the server can let you do a lot of stuff. And all this stuff is covered in the AutoFMS docs, which are pretty thorough and should be a good place to start if you're looking for information. And then the other one thing to mention is we do have a pretty active community at community.automatic.cloud, where people go and can ask questions and report issues and things like that.
Question.
Any other questions? Do I hear something down there?
Yeah. So he mentioned that it's not really the full server manager tool, but it looks like there's a lot of great stuff in there.
Yeah.
What might I have to go to the command line to?
Well, the command line, or we're thinking more in comparing it to the admin console, so the web UI.
Right.
Right. So the web UI has a few other things. Schedules is one of the big ones because the schedule UI is a big thing we just haven't decided to tackle yet. And there's other stuff that we don't do. We're focused mostly on managing stuff after the server is set up and configured, as opposed to things you might be doing when you set up a system kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah, so
But
if you
there
need, like,
could come a day when we would simply replace everything on there. It's not beyond us to do that. And with the AI coding tools getting so good, it might not be that hard for us to fully build out everything that's available in the admin
Looks
console.
great.
But the other things that we jumped over just to make really clear is the other big feature. Really, like, there's sort of three big features that people, when they first get exposed to this, they get very excited about. One is the automated deployments and migrations and all that. The second one is webhooks, which I don't know that we'll have much time to dive into, but really drop dead easy way to receive webhooks from any third-party system that sends webhooks. It's just really easy. It takes almost no effort to do. And then the other one is offsite backup. So you can configure the server to do offsite backups to any S3 compatible any S3 compatible storage. So those are the three biggies. Then there's a billion other little things that are really cool, but those are the big ones.
Can you export to custom, like TrueNAS servers?
Can you
It's
export to, I'm
S3.
sorry,
Yeah. Could you shuffle, your backups to like a TrueNAS server?
what's a TrueNAS? I don't know what a TrueNAS server is.
TrueNAS?
TrueNAS. Oh, you mean like just a mounted disk?
Yeah, like just a homegrown
Yeah, but
lab setup.
you probably already have that mounted to your server, so you can just do backups to that. Right? Like this would
Yes.
be moving it off site to get it out of the network or out of that's really what the offsite backups are for, is to get it shipped to someplace that is not something you're
Off premise.
maintaining. So when your house burns down, you have your files, or your office burns down, kind of thing.
Really cool.
Tony has a question.
Yeah, thanks. So the schedule, you mentioned you hadn't tackled it, probably a smart move because it's pretty complicated data
Yeah, it
structure.
is. Yeah.
I see Gabe also mentioning schedules. So coincidentally, I was doing a deep dive on one of the data API, what's it called? Admin API tools. There's three out there. I'm not going to tell anyone because they're all awesome, but I picked one of them and I'm building it out. And the workflow that I have right now is build some schedules with the UI that have a plausible pattern, pull them down, which does all the heavy lifting of populating the data structure. And then I've got a duplicate script that I wrote all by myself.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So
And then just,
we should show that, Kyle. This is like the deployment thing.
so it can be easy with the existing tools, but you do need the data structure, which is rather complex.
Yeah.
Pull them down, tweak them, push them back with a different server ID.
The other thing,
go.
Because you can write, insert from URL with FileMaker. Can you show auto deploy real quick and show the JSON options? Because so once you have a deployment set up, you can just grab the JSON, right? And so now you basically just point this at any server.
JSON is just an API.
You point this at any server with a simple script call, and you can deploy this file set to any server. Again, running AutoFMS, right? So constructing the JSON object is the pain in the butt, but then once you have that, it's really simple to just use insert from URL and set up a script that sends that to as many servers as you want on demand. And that's true for pretty much everything that we have set up here. Once you get the JSON constructed, the APIs exist. AutoFMS is an API first system. Like almost everything we do in auto deploy and in AutoFMS and in OCC has an API, and you can use it too with FileMaker or any other tool. And it's all documented. And again, it's using OpenAPI as the spec. If you feed this to Cursor and say, write me a curl option that will call this, use the OpenAPI spec and write me a curl command that does this thing, it'll write it. Like all the AI tools understand OpenAPI. And so everything we do has an OpenAPI spec that is perfectly in sync with the code that's running on the server. Chris?
Yeah, Chris, what's up?
So you know, I've been interested in ransomware defense and things like that for a long time. And so one of the things you want to do to test your resiliency is to say, take a backup, throw it up onto an S3 as an immutable backup so that it can't be, you know, encrypted.
Right.
And, but, you know, one of the problems with that is people can't be bothered to test their process. Like, do I have a known good backup? If I have to recover from it, can I recover from it? And so it'd be awesome to have an automated process that says, okay, takes Midnight's backup, throw it up there as immutable, and then grab the backup before that, spin it up, you know, basically host it somewhere. I don't need to host it on my production server, but host it on a server.
Mhm.
And then, you know, open the database and have it have the ability to respond to some sort of ping. Maybe I send a
Sure.
call to it or an API command or something, and it says, yes, I'm here. And so that you have a known recoverable backup. Yes, it will open. I've just proved it'll open. I'm good if you know, the worst comes to pass. And so it'd be great if you could sort of script that process, you know, make it immutable, put it up there, unpack it, host it, ping it, and then the end of that process is a true, you have a known good backup and we've just proved it. How hard would that be to implement?
Well, so the immutability is usually set by the storage provider, or at least in terms of S3, you can make the S3 bucket immutable essentially. And so that's just a matter of if you want that. And we have an S3 compatible storage that we can sell you. I don't know do you know if it's immutable, Kyle?
It is not immutable, but
We should
we
make,
are looking at
we
making
might be
it
able to make
possible to
one
be
that is an
immutable.
optional immutable, but we
Yeah.
sell it, I think it's, what do we sell it for per month? I don't remember.
I think it's 20
Yeah,
20 a
20 bucks
terabyte.
a month. And we have some really good integration with the tools on top of that. But but anyway, so we don't have a scriptable way to pull a backup yet from that, do we, Kyle?
We do. Yeah, so offsites run offsite backups. They push up a set of files, which are in this DBs folder, and then there is an API to list the list of files from within this folder. So you could write a script that basically lists the files in this folder, finds the newest one. This has just it has the databases folder in it, and then this has apparently one file. This you can restore, so I could restore this backup, I could transfer the container data. This is just running a deployment, so you can script the deployment. If I click restore here, you'll see it happen.
Okay, but so so if you're going to script this entirely, like in a FileMaker file, you would find the file you want by iterating through the list of files on the backup in the storage location.
Yeah.
And then you would create a deployment that uses that URL.
Right. And then you could probably do the validation in a post-deployment script.
Yeah. And then you have a post-deployment script that basically would do something, you know, send an email or do something like that. And then you could, I mean, that's like, you know, that's a few FileMaker scripts to do that. And then you could run that every night or use any other tool that you want to write that, to run that script, you know, once a night or whatever to pull your backup.
But you would have to have a server ready to go to receive that, to decompress it.
Yeah.
You would, but you could change the name of the file and put it on your dev server. And then do we have an API for deleting when you're done?
Deleting files?
Deleting the file, because you want to get rid of it.
Use the admin API, right? You could close the file and then delete it.
That's right. So then the admin API is there, and we use we proxy the admin API. So the same admin API key that you're using to run all of Otto's commands, you can also use to run the admin API, the standard API as well.
Yeah.
So yes, Chris, I think you should do that and write a blog post and maybe make your file available to this community. Volunteering Chris for some work.
But yeah, so that's an interesting thing to call out, is that AutoFMS has API keys for the data API and the admin API. I have a lot of them on the server because I do testing here, but these API keys can be used to authenticate with the Auto API at server/auto/API, or at the admin API using a proxy, which is at /auto/FMI/v latest, whatever, the whole admin API proxy. And then you can hit any of the admin API endpoints using an admin API key, and it will do all of the session management for you. So you don't have to do all the token stuff.
And you do not have to put your server credentials into a
Yeah.
third-party system if you wanted to, for example.
Right. You don't put your server credentials in a third party. You don't have to put them into a FileMaker file if you're scripting from in there. And these are, you can delete them and then they won't work anymore. So you can remove them if they get compromised.
You could probably use Claris
All that kind of
Connect or N8N or something like that, Chris, to script up an entire flow. You might even be able to write an agent with N8N that would, to sort of do your ransomware checking for you.
Yeah, I was thinking doing something cool with like spin up a Docker that already has a server deployed on it, and you say, okay, run the Docker, throw the backup on it, check it, shut everything down, and get rid of the Docker instance. And how cool would that
too?
Yeah. It could run on the same server as the live file, though, couldn't it? If you're just bringing a
you
copy
could
down,
just
putting
rename
it down,
them.
runs to check did it successfully, find the last record in the whatever, sends an email, and then comes back and deletes itself if it was fine. If not, you get an email saying was unable to complete because either the server's compromised.
So file won't even open if it's corrupt. Like ransomware, it's encrypted, right? So it's not even going to open. But yes, you should check it. You should check. I mean, the ideal solution is to actually make sure you can host it and run some operation.
Right. So if you go to host it and you get a fail because of corruption, I assume you have some means of capturing the error for the file open to say, look, that wouldn't open. We got a problem.
Well, if you're calling the admin API, then you're going to get back an error in that. Actually, I don't think does the admin API let go until the file is open? When you make a request, I cannot remember.
If you're doing it, so if the file is trying to be opened via AutoFMS, it'll be opened via a deployment, right? And if those error out, they the response. Right. You can pull the deployment status, and then when it's done, the status will say that there's an error.
So you can see the errors here.
Yeah, and then you can see them here, and also with the API. So let's quickly move on though, because I want to also show you the Cloud Console. So AutoFMS is a service running on your FileMaker server that can communicate with FileMaker and can also run stuff on the command line. It exposes the full API as we've discussed. The automatic Cloud Console is in the cloud using the AutoFMS API to connect to your server. So these are the 3 servers that I have right here, just in the Cloud Console instead of in AutoFMS. And the Cloud Console, this is completely free. Everything in here is completely free. You can buy stuff from us if you want to in here, but you can also connect on-prem servers just by clicking add server up here and say connect existing, and then you can add whatever you want.
As long as it's available on the public, as long as it's publicly available on port 443.
You can hit the URL, then you're good. And you can do almost everything that you can do in AutoFMS here. So I can click into Acme Prod. I can say, look, it's my server. It'll show me a bunch of cool stuff about it. This is an automatic server, so you'll see that it's got this data. You can get stats. You can see the disk usage. If you have multiple disks, it'll show you all of the disks. You can do deployments and builds and do the file browser in here. And then if you're running an automatic server, you can restore from automatic backups, which we have separately from just regular offsite backups. You can manage all these settings. But since you're in the cloud now and the servers are all in one place, you can do some interesting stuff. So if, for example, I'm in the databases tab here and I want to get those same files that I had earlier, and I say, give me the test API file and the Kyle API file, and let's move these somewhere. Let's put them in, oh gosh, my demo names. Let's put them on Acme Dev. This will give me the option to change the file names on the way, which I don't really want to. And let's put them in a new folder called FMDiSC. And we'll include the container data. Send. So this creates a deployment for me, creates a build for me, runs the deployment, and then reopens everything everywhere, which means that from right here, I can quickly send files between servers without having to open AutoDeploy, without having to open AutoFMS, without having to connect into the server, download a copy of the files, go to a different server, reopen that server, upload the copy of the files, and I can just do it right from here. I can sit here and watch it. I should really make this actually just take me to the deployment now that they're in the Cloud Console. But and now it's done. That took 30 seconds to move those files between servers. So that's kind of the power behind the Cloud Console, is that you can, AutoFMS has this cool stuff, but it's kind of, you have to use auto deploy to choreograph stuff, or you have to do it yourself via scripting. So the Cloud Console really takes the abilities of AutoFMS and puts the interaction between servers on top of it. I should also, I guess, call out, you can do uploads of files, both from the Cloud Console and from AutoFMS. And yeah, I don't know. There's some other stuff on here that's kind of interesting. So there's some nice tools just for like building FMP URLs. You can see modification timestamps. You can convert SVGs. Another fun thing that the Cloud Console can do, so you can favorite things. So you can see here I have like a favorites only toggle. If I turn that off, I get a full list of servers. But if I look at my little rocket launcher up here, you can see like all of the files and servers that I have favorited, and I can just quickly open them. So I have a test API file favorited. This just opens up FileMaker really fast. And I have this test API file, which is on a different screen. And you can see a picture of my cat. He's very cute. And so you can favorite files, you can favorite servers, and there's also a Command K bar here. So if I wanted to just go to that file really fast, I could Command K, type in test, click enter, opens my file. There's also, if you're on a Mac, there's a Raycast extension that can do something similar that Eric Luce built. So lots of cool stuff that the Cloud Console gives you the power to do. The build deployment thing Todd showed you earlier is on the Cloud Console as well. We're going to expand that build deployment thing to be, so if you're logged in, you can just select one of your servers you have, some stuff like that. So I'll also say you guys had the exciting privilege of being the first people to ever see that build deployment page.
Yes.
So
You're the
it
first
went live
ones.
like 3 days ago. So
Yep.
yeah. So, and then of course there's some just like simple interaction here. You can open up the Cloud Console. You can look at the admin. You can quickly open the admin console. You can do all those same file actions I showed you earlier from here. So you can do all of the opening and closing and downloading clones, and you can send individual files. You can get XMLs. You can do tons of stuff. You can also really quickly open files in FileMaker. This has some nice like filtering capabilities. So you can say, only show me my big files, stuff like that. But
Do we have the can you show the this is what, if you're a dev shop and you have lots of servers, lots of customers, and you do the search files thing, like what file is that server? What server is that file on? I'll remember the name. I don't know what server it's on.
Show me so many of them.
So I had this. I asked Kyle to build this for me because I'm always forgetting which one of the servers that we have connected up has whatever demo file I'm working on or whatever. So this will locate across all the servers that you have connected to OCC. It'll find the files and then quickly let you move to them.
Yeah, and you can see I have I can quickly open this in FileMaker. I can go look at the server. So all of that kind of thing.
Is it possible to store like default users? Well, what we do is we have like a test user of each permission per client file, and I've got a FileMaker file that can launch those. It's useful to be able to log in and test on a client file a particular user type. Is there any way to save like test users rather than just doing the FMP
There
URL?
is sort of.
There is sort of. So if you're using the URL builder, you can save just URLs. So if you could, and then you can add the credentials here. So if I wanted to add my Acme prod URL, and I wanted to do that test API file we were using, and I wanted to add my credentials, and then I want to save this as a favorite as test user. Then I go back to servers and I say test user. That will just open it up without me having to put in any credentials.
How much time did we just save you, Gabe? Right there. You're muted, but I can see.
I have a launcher file at the moment with them all in, but
I had the launcher file for like a couple decades. I feel you, but yeah, you just and with the Raycast extension, this is even it's all available on your OS. So you just do pop up Raycast, do search favorites, search thing, boom, launched. You don't even need to be in the Cloud Console.
Yeah,
it's pretty sweet.
Pretty sweet. And then, there's a grid view of this if you want to see your servers in a nice little grid. And it has this is the AutoFMS color, so you can color code your servers in AutoFMS. So if you have oh, I'm on prod, it should be bright red so that I know not to break anything. Then when you're in the cloud console or the AutoFMS console, it has the bright color everywhere.
Show them the settings for the themes.
Yeah, so then in the settings here, you can add a custom theme color. You can make it yellow. This is the prod server. We'll make it this nice purple color. I can change this. I can add an environment tag. So if you're like, oh, this is my test server actually, and let's make my environment tag a nice purple. Then it shows test in here, and in the cloud console, this will update momentarily, probably if I refresh. This will also show test in the new color. So there's a bunch of kind of server customization and organization you can do there as well. And then
go back
of course
to the settings for a second. Something triggered in my mind. What was I thinking here? Team color server. I can't remember now. Okay, well, I've forgotten.
I will, I guess, also call out. You saw auto deploy earlier. Auto deploy is a self-updating FileMaker file. Which is powered by AutoFMS. Do I have auto deploy on this server? Yes, I do. I don't need that copy of auto deploy though. So let's just demonstrate something really fast. So this is my staging server. This will take a second to delete probably. Go away. Server's being slow. Very slow. Interesting. Okay, we'll try it on this server. Close this file, which will yell at me because I have it open. Oh, goodness. And then I will delete it. So if I don't have auto deploy on this server and I make sure that I set up my pop-up settings to do that right, I go here, you can see at this top, there's this banner that says set up auto deploy, and you can go learn more if you want, but we're going to deploy now. I'm going to say put it in the demo folder we made earlier. Let's deploy that. This will deploy auto deploy to your server using AutoFMS. And then it'll deploy them, it'll open the files. It'll be done. We can launch it. And this will launch it with the default credentials, which you can see in that pop-up there. This fetches down the most recent copy of the web code and installs it. And then you can see here, boom, new file, completely blank, no servers. So this is a web viewer, right? So when there are updates to it, we push an update, a little thing pops up in the bottom here that says, hey, you have an update. You click a button, fetches the new HTML, inserts it, done. Takes like a second and a half. When there's a new FileMaker version, which we've only done once, I think, at this point, you click the button, it says, hey, did you change the file name? What are the credentials, et cetera, et cetera. Then it kicks off a deployment, closes your file, pulls down the newest copy, runs the deployment, and then you have a new copy of auto deploy immediately in your server. So you have like a file that updates itself from within the FileMaker file, right? Which AutoFMS, like, we haven't done anything special with that. There's nothing that like we did that you don't know how to do with the developer API or with FileMaker. So you could easily make, maybe not easily, but you could make a FileMaker file that updates itself when there are available options. So then you just need to be able to like put your new version somewhere and read them, right? So that's all possible.
I want to return to this idea about the FileMaker web viewer stuff in a little bit. But before we do, did we decide we were going to show projects at all? I can't remember.
I didn't talk about it.
Can we show something?
Yeah, hold on. I have to make it so that I can see them. Turned it off. Let me just go into the secret background.
Feature flags.
So projects is is sort of our next iteration on top of this whole thing, which is a way of defining your set of files and giving you a way to manage the development of those files with things like snapshots and change logs and builds that get published and all of that stuff. And so this is coming soon. So this is a project. And so we've got.
This is a project.
Yeah. So like take it from there.
Yeah, so this is a project. It's essentially, you can think of it as change control for FileMaker, sort of. It's a way to organize files and servers while doing change tracking, version control, as well as just like putting all the links you need in a nice spot, right? It's just, there's this whole rich text description you can put links in, and you can add all this documentation about your set of files. There's quick launching, so I can open these files really fast. I can add multiple servers and then launch the same files across different servers. But the kind of flagship piece of it is change tracking. So if I open this file, into my credentials, and I go over here and I go into layout mode, not that layout mode. I don't use FileMaker very much. I move this layout option object. I close that. I go over here. I say create a checkpoint. I move the layout object. We'll call this patch change, and we'll create a checkpoint. This runs a checkpoint really fast. So a checkpoint does a few things. It creates a clone of your file. It creates this XML of that clone, and then in AutoFMS, it reads the XML and creates a JSON representation of it that it can then diff against previous checkpoints. So you can see here, oh look, Kyle changed this layout object. It's not super in depth right now, but you can see I changed the auto receiver layout, and it was in this file today, right?
So so obviously you'd want a rich diff in many cases, and we're certainly working towards that. In the short term, you can download the XMLs between the two versions that are displayed here, and you can use FM comparison to view sort of the more in-depth changes between there. But the main thing is that this is kind of like this diff. This will tell you every object that's been changed between the two things at a high level. So it'll tell you a script, a layout, a field, it'll give you like, oh, this thing changed. So when you're making your change notes, and when you're making builds and preparing new versions, you actually get a chance to review what's happened between the two things, and you get an opportunity to write change notes and all that. And so it's one way to just sort of, again, follow the practice of tracking this stuff. And in some cases, some companies are required by the certifications that they hold to do this. Like it's not something they can skip. They have to do this kind of change management. And so this is sort of our first iteration of it without doing a full diff like what FM comparison can do, because that just takes much more time and hard to do on the server. But we're moving towards that, and we hope to be able to provide those sorts of views in the future. But then when you get to the end and you got a thing that you're ready to release, you can actually produce a release. And that's where we're moving towards. So instead of a build, you're now like, I am creating a formal release. And you can review your change notes, and you can get everything set up the way that you want. And when you're done with that, you will get a build, and you'll get a change note, a change log of all the changes that you tracked for that thing. And then you could use that build for deployments to your production server, for example, or servers if you're a vertical market person. So full release cycle, we're not checking into Git, and part of the reason there is that diffing a save as XML result, which is essentially one XML file per file, is really not diffable in the standard way. You wouldn't, if you look at it in GitHub's diff, it would just be, you wouldn't be able to tell what was changed. It's one file with, dozens of changes per thing. It would be not possible. So in order to actually view the changes in a FileMaker XML file, you need something like FM comparison, or like our little diff viewer that we have here. So let's stop there.
And I guess I'll call out, so I kind of rushed
go ahead.
through that. Yeah, I guess the one thing to call out is that when you create releases, you create basically a build and then a version that is attached to that build. You create a release candidate and a release. The release creates a changelog, and the changelog you can publish.
Yeah.
So I can publish this changelog, I can make it public. Then in my application, if you're versioning your FileMaker applications, you can put a link that says, this is what changed in this version. Someone can come here and say, oh my gosh, you did these things. Or they can go look
Or
at the
you could
version
display it in
history
a
of your
web viewer in your
project.
FileMaker file
Or you
when
could
you
put
start
it in
up.
a web viewer. Yeah. So you can see what's happened in the versions, and you can show it if you have a customer who's like, hey, what did you do in this version? And you changed like 60 things and you don't want to find them all and type them out. You can add change notes as you go and then
So could you
create
use
this
this,
essentially.
could you use this to auto build a migration so that you know what all the files that are going to get migrated?
Yeah, so that's kind of our next step, is connecting deployments to this. So once you're here and you have a release, right, it's easy to say, oh, click a button, deploy this to the other servers. Because right, this in here, I have the option to add multiple servers. So I could add my prod server and my 4 other customers' servers that I have in the Cloud Console. I could set up some deployments ahead of time. I could click a release and say deploy using this deployment. It'll autofill the build ID, use the existing settings that I have for that deployment, and run it. That doesn't exist yet, but it's going to. So that's kind of the goal, is the full release cycle right from in here. You say do dev, add notes as I go. When I want to do a release, I create a build, I create a release, I create a change log. I run a deployment that moves that release from my dev server to my customers. I send my customers a link that says, this is what we changed. And then you're good to go, right? So that's it. It's everything. You don't have to go to auto deploy, you don't have to go to FMS, you just do it all right here.
I want to stop there because we're almost out of time, and I want to get and see if there's any questions. But I do want to mention that projects is in sort of a beta release right now. It is likely there. So we're probably going to release projects in 2 forms. One, it will be free if you're willing to make your project public and to show up inside a registry of available solutions that can be deployed onto any auto FMS server. So if you're like, you know, a lot of dev shops have their starter kits that you know, they encourage people to download. So this would be something like that, where it would show up in a marketplace where people could search for different types of solutions, and they would be able to download those solutions. I don't mean public as in the code has to be open. I mean public that you're willing to put it on our marketplace that we're building on top of all the stuff that you're seeing here. So, you know, for example, Gabe, you potentially could put your kitchen construction management software on here, and it would show up as being available in the product marketplace, and then you could still apply whatever licensing you'd want to do. If we're probably going to charge for private projects, is the way that we're gonna, like, you know, we try to find ways to monetize things that are, you know, relatively valuable and relatively you know, advanced, you know, like just things that are
high-level
sort of
stuff,
beyond the standard stuff that we kind of give away for free. So that's what projects it is. What's the current release status of it currently? What do we have?
Currently it's in private beta.
Yeah.
I suspect our plan is to release it in public beta to the public somewhat soon.
Yeah, we're going to get it out in public for people to try and give us feedback. There's likely this is going to change. Part of the reason it's not released is there's some stuff coming in 22 that's going to potentially force us to do things differently. And so we'll have to see how that all plays out. But that's our vision and that's our goal. So that is the automatic platform. And, you know, you can use, I mean, pretty much everything that we've seen here except the stuff that I've called out. It's all free. It's all available for you to use. And you don't need to pay us anything. If you want support, we have support contracts, obviously, that are available. But otherwise, all help is through the community. And you can ask for help and questions. And usually we answer them within, you know, some period of time. But if you want more, if you have a need for professional support contracts, those are available. So let me stop there and ask questions, comments. What do people think?
Hey, Todd, we had talked about also discussing vibe coding. Were you gonna?
Yeah, which I think I still have some time left, right?
Sure.
Yeah, so that's why I want to stop here.
Okay, great.
So I wanted to show some stuff there. And I think I'm off by like 15 minutes. I wanted to stop a little while ago, and I got my calculations wrong. But I still should have enough time to give you an idea where we're at and to give you something to play with on your own, and we can do that. But
No problem. We can run a little long. It's not.
okay. And I can stay on for as long as people want to talk about it, but I'll make sure I push through and give you guys a sense of what we're working on in terms of the vibe coding stuff for FileMaker. But any comments or questions about Automatic, about our plans for Marketplace, for comments, questions? Roman's got a question, looks like.
Yeah, this is not sort of a question or comment you're looking for. I feel like I've been watching a demo with mostly 6-point gray text on a black background.
Oh, go back to, I'm sorry, I meant to call, that's what I meant to call out. So Kyle likes dark mode. I am a fan of
I
light
like
mode
dark
for this.
mode.
So just share your screen. It's full light mode is available. You don't need to look at it in dark mode.
That's a hell of a lot easier. Some text is still real small.
Well, that's just because we're sharing over the screen.
Yeah, I just have a massive screen.
Yeah, you can, these are, if you download and look at it on your own screen, you can, it's very readable. Yeah.
Did take that into consideration. I use as a line the menu up at the top of the screen, the app menu. So I did take that into consideration. Great product, but
thank you.
Look difficult to use from a perspective of how easy is it to read on the screen.
Yeah, I just think that's all because of the screen sharing here. It's not anywhere near this small when you're looking at it on your own monitor.
Yeah, and if your browser font size is adjusted, it should adjust to be larger, and
you can
that
just
kind
click,
of thing.
Command plus, and it will all resize.
Yeah, I could just zoom in. Yeah. So.
All right. A quick question about the projects. Using the save as XML.
Yes.
Is the plan to kind of at some point with FM perception to kind of link those kind of projects together where you'd be able to script the generation of the DDR on the server and launch directly out of that? Is that a workflow you're thinking about?
It is something that we're looking at supporting. It's really it's just a matter of priorities and how do we monetize, because FM perception, FM comparison is a relatively expensive product, and we like the money we make on it. So if we were to put it into OCC, we would have to do something around monetizing that in some way. So we feel like there's enough edge case, there's enough around the edges where we can charge you for things that are super valuable, but still give you the ability to run. I mean, basically what we're trying to do is give you the ability to run a professional software organization. That's really what we're trying to do. That's what Auto FMS and Auto Deploy and OCC is all about. On top of that, we're going to add value. You can come to us for hosting and get the monitoring and the awesome servers that we have, and the support that we have, or you can come to us and get maybe better analysis tools and things like that, and we will charge you for that. But at the base level, we think it should be absolutely default that anybody who wants to run a professional software development company with professional software development life cycles and capabilities should just be free. You should not have to pay for that. And so that's why we built the whole thing. Yeah. All right. Cool. Let's move on to some other things. So some people in this meeting have been seeing some versions of this that I'm going to share now. No, it's on a different screen. Hang on a second. I got to find myself here. What am I? So this is something different. I want to stress that this is an experiment, and this is I do not know how much support or I'm going to continue to noodle around with this and to try things and to experiment. But I don't, the basic, as you'll see, the basic point of this is to do AI assisted code programming for FileMaker. That's the goal here. And primarily because when I write FileMaker, I really cannot, it's really very hard for me now that I've got the AI coding tools with Cursor it's really hard to go back to a scenario where I'm having to point and click around a UI to write code. It's just very challenging. So this is my own personal experimentation into that. And Claris is working on this, and they know that this is an issue, and they are working hard on adding these kinds of tools to the platform, and hopefully we'll see some of that bear fruit very soon. But I expect that everything that I'm doing here will be, at least they will attempt to replace in the platform. And I don't think this is a tool that should exist. Again, this is another tool that should not be charged for. This should be free. It should be part of the FileMaker platform. And I'm going to try to do as much as I can in the user space. And other people are doing similar experiments. But this is sort of my approach to it. So this is the website. You can go to it. You can download a file. It is a FileMaker file. And it looks like, I've got a bunch of old copies here. Let's make sure I get a current copy and open that. So this is again, so by the way, I just have to say, FileMaker is an awesome container for web applications. This is how I prefer, and certainly how we like to ship anything in FileMaker. We like to make it with one layout that has a web viewer on it and build a web app that sits inside it. That is my favorite way to do it. I get to use Cursor to do all of the code generation, and FileMaker provides a really nice container for delivery. So if I am shipping to FileMaker customers, this gives me security. It gives me, I can like we do with auto deploy is a file that you have control over. It runs on your server. You can encrypt it, set up passwords, whatever you want, but we can still ship you new code whenever we want to update the code or whenever you want to get new code. So we think that a FileMaker file is an awesome, awesome way to ship an application that is built entirely with web technology. You get the FileMaker server database for storage. You get the, as Gabe showed, you get all of the browser storage. You get container storage. I mean, you just get all the different kinds of storage that you want. You can have backend logic running FileMaker scripts. You can have backend logic running on a servers that I'm going to show. It's awesome. This is our favorite way to do stuff. So having said all that, let's get going. So the first thing you're going to need is an OpenAPI key. We are using OpenAPI here. I'm going to enable other LLMs. And good. So now we've got, now we're ready. Light mode and dark mode is available here as well. I'm kind of a light mode fan with everything except Cursor for some reason. Let's make a new chat. Oh, wonderful. Oh, I think that's actually ready to go. I've just shipped this lately, so I apologize if anything is still broken. But let's say, write me a FileMaker calc that tells me how many days until the first Sunday of the next month. Now, it's a calc. It's probably going to do a pretty good job with this. Let's see. I sometimes it's still something. So display that. It missed a Q here as a FileMaker calc. I'm missing one thing. No, it's not doing it. Oh well. Rats. It's supposed to say FileMaker calc here. I'm not sure why it isn't. And that would give me an evaluate button. But you can copy this, right? This is fairly simple. I don't think anybody's surprised by what you could do with that. You could paste that into the data viewer, and you can evaluate it, do all the things you normally would do. Not very exciting, but it does do calcs. It does format it very well. Let's do something more interesting. Give me a FileMaker script that goes to a layout, name contacts, creates a new record, and sets the first name field to Todd. So I'm using actually ChatGPT's GPT 4.0 here to do this. And sometimes it can take a while. Oh, this is taking a lot more than I expected. Here we go. So there's our script. It's really missing the prompts here. And this is really going to be a problem. I don't know what's happened. Display this. It's going to break my demo if I can't get it to get that right. Display this as a FileMaker script. Yeah, this is not behaving. Interesting. Let me try really quickly here just to see if I can get a little further along with my demo version, with my dev version. All right, and then we'll open the file. And then I need to toggle the dev mode here. All right, so here's some other, this will at least let me show some of the coolest parts about this. So this is me doing a bunch of tests. So here's me writing another script earlier. I don't know why it's decided to not recognize that it's supposed to put FileMaker script here. Interesting. But once it does, it gives me these buttons, which are the things I really wanted to show. So you can view the XML and, oh my gosh. This really was not having so many problems before. Let me do that calculation and we'll put, let me open up my demo file. Where is it? I don't see it on my screen. Oh, it's down here. So, yeah, I'm not exactly sure why this is having so much difficulty. This kind of stuff was child's play for it when I was doing this earlier. Here you can see the evaluate. So it's doing that. At least that's working. Let's try and ask it. Let's try another one. Let's get really bold. I'm going to copy this to the clipboard and I'm going to come over here to the chat. I'm just going to select this button. That's going to put that table in XML format into the chat. And then I've got some, where do I have this in my dev tools? I've got some JSON here. No, I don't. Disappointing.
It looks like it's heading in the right direction.
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure what's happening. Some people have seen this already behave much better than it's doing right now.
It's a demo.
I'm not sure, but we'll try to get really bold here and ask it to do the big things and see how far it gets. So I've got some JSON that I want to basically I've given it a table, and now I'm going to give it some JSON. Here is some JSON. Use this to write a script that parses the JSON and sets it into fields. There's my JSON.
You'll need to mention a script that you need. Write a script.
Oh, use this to write a script, write a FileMaker script. Thank you. Let's see if it gets this one. I see it's still thinking along here. So it's
What's the
extracting the
LLM
data
running
correctly.
on?
There it goes. And it's kind of figured out the names in the table, and it's added the names correctly. Now this one, I don't know that I want to use this one, this step. We'll just copy this and see what we get. So if I click this, see what the XML, yeah, hopefully it's not red. Yeah, okay. So this one recognized all the script steps properly. So this is much better. So basically the chats are pretty good at constructing this sort of text-based FileMaker coding. And then the real big challenge is once you get that, how do you make XML that you can paste back into FileMaker? And that's what this does. So this should be valid FileMaker data, FileMaker's clipboard XML. And if I copy that to the clipboard and I go to my demo file and I make a new script and I paste, this should do pretty well. And it sure does. It missed a couple because I've taught this thing to use I've taught this chat to use some custom functions, which I don't have in here. So that's probably pretty good considering you don't have those custom functions. But that did do what we wanted it to do. Now, again, you do like any other vibe coding kind of thing. Looks like it did not do the close transaction. Did it open it? The quality on this went way down. I apologize. I'm not sure what has gone on with this latest release, but it recognized this as a transaction step, I think. Anyway, I'm going to stop there. You could download this file and you can play with it. And I'm going to continue to work on it. And whenever you open it, it should just get the latest. It should just get the latest version of whatever I'm working on. Just to be very clear on what's happening here and what's going where, this is sending the chats are all going to OpenAI. So you should know that. We're not keeping any of the chats, and the chats are all being stored locally in your local storage. So if we inspect this element and look at the storage, you can see that here's the chat store right here. So we're not storing this data anywhere on the server. We're just using the server to kind of do some of the more advanced AI processing. Yeah, so play around with it. You can give feedback or ask questions in the community, which is we looked at before. There's a new topic for this file that you can ask questions with, and hopefully I can make it behave like the way it was before. But anyway, that's our experiments towards vibe coding in FileMaker. Questions or comments?
I see Robert has his hand up.
Robert.
Thank you, Todd. It's a very cool demo, even if there are things that were not necessarily the way you expected.
No.
And I kind of like that you showed something where there's a custom function being involved.
Yeah.
So is it something where, as people would use this, right, we could ourselves teach, okay, well,
Yes.
here are some of my own custom functions. So I suspect like we'd have access to something that's a bit like a system prompt, and then we could inject things in there.
Yes. So right now I've written all the prompts, and so they are based on my my stuff. So, you know, I could tell it here to like apply our comment header standard. And it's gonna rewrite that script eventually with my comment standard. You know, this is the way we write comments. So that I you know, sort of if things keep moving and I keep doing stuff, it's the idea would be that you would have a settings page here where you would enter in the prompts for the various things, like what custom functions do you have, and this is how you should enter them, right? What's your commenting style, right? And those system prompts will be used in place of the ones that I'm using. I'm not sure. Like, I wonder if I change the models that I'm using in the background, because things definitely behave very differently than the last few times I tried this. This is part of the challenge with AI, is that you're in a non-deterministic playground, and so you have to like figure out how to constrain it, and that is worth understanding. Oh, the other thing I should say is pretty much everything I've shown here you can build entirely in FileMaker with the tools, you know, the script steps that are now in FileMaker. But again, I really like to build stuff with web UI. I really struggle with going back to designing FileMaker layouts at this point.
Hey, Todd, there was a question from Beatrice about
Sure.
will you be adding Cohere as an alternative to OpenAI?
I think I'm going to do a Claude for sure, and probably Google Gemini 2.5 as options to play around with, and different things there. I don't know. Again, this is not something we're charging for, so it's really going to be sort of based on what I am interested in trying, frankly, and what I think can be made to work better. So those are the three that I'm thinking of first. Claude is very good at coding, and Google Gemini 2.5 is supposed to be even better. So we want to do that. I maybe get to Cohere at some point.
All right, we'll definitely look forward to your coming back and keeping us updated on your progress as you pursue this further. Certainly a tantalizing direction that things are going in.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no question that I could make this work. It's sort of how much time, or make it work better. It's really sort of how much time do I want to put into it is really the thing. And that is, again, because Claris is doing that, there's, we're never going to recoup a lot of money based on this. So I have to be careful of the time I spent. But one last thing just to point out, I think it's important to figure out, if you're thinking about AI and with FileMaker, how do you think about building AI into your tools? The most important thing to understand is that AIs, when you ask it to generate something, that is probabilistic, which means the results will vary. And so you have to figure out how to constrain and teach those things, teach the tools how to give you back results that fit within certain constraints. And then you have to break it out and figure out what things you absolutely have to be deterministic, and you have to write AI tools to do that here. And so just to illustrate, in this case, when we're looping through the FileMaker, we're looking at, where did it go? When you look at a script, we break this down line by line, and we try to determine what script step this is. And that is probabilistic. Because we're not sure what exactly this is going to get generated, how that's going to look. So we need a step that is going to use AI to make its best guess at what script step that is. And then once we have the script step, once we know the script step with any certainty, then we can write code that generates that XML deterministically, because you will never get the LLMs to generate the XML deterministically. It's not possible. You'll never get it to reproducibly create the right XML. So, but what you can do is get it to tell you what script ID it might be, what script step ID it is. And you can then use that to basically have a function which says, oh, this is set field. Here's the XML for set field. Here's the parameters that go into that, generate the XML perfectly deterministically. And so that's something you have to think about as you work through breaking down AI problems. Breaking down problems you want to solve with AI in FileMaker is what things are going to require us to write a tool that can get you the actual answer, not its best guess, but the actual answer kind of thing. So anyway, it's an important tip, important thing to switch your mindset around as you dig into these problems.
That's a great insight. All right, I think we're going to wrap it up for this month. Thank you again to Gabriel and Chris and Todd for presenting, and we will be back next month. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks,
Todd.
You.